Sure.
Okay.
Oh, sure. Thanks, Ryan.
Good evening, everyone. It is now 6:30, and I will call this regular work session of the Burnsville City Council to order. Our work sessions are very informal, but we'll go around and introduce everyone because we have some guests in the room as well for the items that we have for today's agenda, and we usually go directly to the agenda. We are, to our listening public, we are having some technical difficulties, and it's not going to be pulling up the PowerPoint presentation. So, but as soon as they get that fixed, then you will be able to see it at home. But right now, hard copies are being passed out throughout the chambers so that folks who are in the room also have it. But I'm Elizabeth Couts. I'm the mayor of the city of Burnsville. I'll go to my right first this time.
Oh, sorry. Dan Keeley, Burnsville City Council.
Heather Johnston, City Manager.
Ryan Peterson, City Engineer and Natural Resources Director.
Sarah Tracy, Dakota County Assistant Traffic Engineer.
I'm Bryant Fisek with SPAC Consulting, working with the county and the city.
Jenny Faulkner, Community Development Director for the city.
Steve Albrecht, Public Works.
Bill Coughlin's Burnsville City Council.
I'm Mary Sherry, City Council.
Michelle Collins, City Clerk.
And we're going to go to the outside. The gentleman in the back, please.
John Gessner, son this week.
Okay,
Liz Workman, Dakota County Commissioner.
Dan Gustafson, Burnsville resident.
okay.
Plainfield, Burnsville Police Department. David Mylod, Cliffview Plaza.
Welcome.
Jim Bradrick, Burnsville Planning Commission.
Steve Benke, Burnsville Planning Commission.
Steve Levy, Burnsville Planning Commission.
Christy Sebastian, Dakota County Traffic.
Very good.
Christina Morrison, Metro Transit.
Jim Harwood, Metro Transit.
Very good. And in the back, just coming in.
Vince Workman, Planning Commission.
Welcome, everybody. The first item on the agenda is the Aging Signalized Intersection Study discussion. And Ryan Peterson, our city engineer, is going to introduce our guests this evening and give us a little overview of what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the council, I'll be real brief because I don't want to steal their thunder. But basically, we have 3 intersections that have signals at them now, and we want to be sure, in collaboration with Dakota County, that when they get replaced, that they're getting replaced with the most cost-effective, best type of traffic control that we can. And then this study that we're going through will allow us to plan for what type of replacement we should go forward with. And with that, I would introduce Sarah Tracy, Assistant Traffic Engineer with Dakota County, and she can introduce the speaker.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, Sarah and Brian, welcome. And I'm very glad that our staff and all of you at the county are looking at us as partners because these intersections are in Burnsville. And we hear from our constituents. And so getting our perspective and our optics on this discussion is very important. So thank you. So when we get into the study, at least you're hearing what we hear from our constituents.
Yeah, you're welcome, and we're happy to be here. So as Ryan mentioned, the purpose of our study is to take a look at these 3 intersections in the city of Burnsville. 5 in Burnsville Parkway, 5 in 136th Street, and then we're also looking at CASA 11 in Burnsville Parkway. So there's 3 of them. The oldest signal there is at 5 in Burnsville Parkway. That's 37 years old. So it's aging and it's getting pretty old, and we're having some issues there due to the age of that signal as well as the other 2. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Bryant Fisek. He is the consultant that we've hired to help us with this study, and he's going to give you an overview of what we've done so far and where we're going.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to try to go through what was originally slides pretty quick here, but feel free to stop me along the way, ask questions, and then at the end I hope we have some time so there's some discussion and we can talk about whatever you want in a little more detail. So the first thing on your handout, existing conditions. So this is just starting with what we've done out there to date. We went out there, pretty standard for a traffic study, got traffic counts on what would be classified as a normal day, Tuesday to Thursday, looking at that normal time where most people are going to and from work. Went out for us, taking a lot of observations. Me and my staff, we don't go through these every day, so we try to do our best to get out there and make sure we understand better what's going on. Looked at the crash history for the last 3 years, and then we did some initial analysis, which is really more towards setting our computer models so they match the existing conditions, so that when we go forward, when we change the traffic control, we can be assured that they're close and pretty on with what's going to happen out there. So going on to the next one, some of the existing conditions that we found at 5 and Burnsville Parkway. Again, looking at the operations and the volumes, and that the volumes out there are high enough that we would clearly say this justifies a signal. This meets the thresholds, the signal warrants that we look at. The operations today are operating without significant delay during the peaks. We would call that about a level of service C, which is good. Like I said, operating acceptably. And then in terms of the crash history, the history that we looked at is a little higher than average. If you look at similar intersections, higher than average, but it's not what we would term a critical rate. We didn't see any significant trends or anything that we would say this is a significant issue. So a little higher than we would like, but not critical. Moving on to 5 and 136th. This one, the counts we had, there were lower volumes, particularly from the side streets. And when we compare that to the traffic signal warrants, it met the threshold for 1, but it was just barely over that. And with the county's help, or I should say the county did this on themselves, they looked at how that would fare in their priority order, and there are at least 25 other intersections that would go above this if we were just looking at sites for a signal today. With that, it operates with minimal delay during the peaks again. We're at a level of service A or B, so again, very good operations. And the crash history was about average compared to similar type of intersections. So,
Under the same, with the same automobiles coming down on 5 at the same time and going through the 136 and the Parkway, if you're doing the same analysis?
yes, so on 5, they are the same. It's really the volumes
On the cross street?
on the cross street.
Ah, okay, all right.
So Burnsville Parkway compared to 136, there's
Yeah.
quite a bit
Oh,
of a
yeah.
difference there.
Okay,
So
yeah,
that's really where the
okay,
difference
on
comes
the
in.
cross street,
Yep.
okay.
And then the last one, 11 in Burnsville Parkway, again, looking at the traffic signal warrants, it met the peak hour warrants, operates again without significant delay, level of service B. And here, again, the crash history was higher than the averages, but not at a critical rate. So generally, as we looked at all 3, they're operating pretty well today. We would say there were no significant issues, no significant trends that we identified that said there's an issue that we need to solve immediately. So it really does go back to the purpose of this study, that aging signals, they need to be replaced. So is this still the best option or not? And that's what we're looking at.
Okay, Mary?
Yes.
When we do an analysis of crash history, you look at the causes for the crashes. The reason I ask the question is I live close to the 11 and Burnsville Parkway intersection, and I go that way a lot, and I don't know, but I'm just wondering if left turns are a factor in that? I mean, do you look at
Yep, so the information we pull provides the type of crash, how many vehicles might be involved, time of day, was it wet, was it dry? And so we take that and we put that into a calculation called the crash rate, and that's where we can do that comparison to other intersections. So that gives us that feel for, are we about average, above, or below? When we saw that it was above average, that's when we took the extra step to really look into those crashes and see, okay, are there trends that we need to look at, which could be the left turns, or it could be snow, whatever that might be. And that's where, when we looked through that data, there were left turn crashes, but there wasn't that common thread through all of them. We would say that's the significant issue.
Just curious, thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Other questions? Okay.
Is it-
I don't know if the folks at home are seeing the Burnsville
No,
logo.
they'll-
No.
No, they're still working on,
Okay, then turning to potential alternatives. So as we look at this, the first alternative is obviously a traffic signal. And so there are kind of general characteristics are things that we look at, when to use. These are generally used in higher volume corridors, major arterials. So with the county roads there, obviously they would be the candidates for those signals. The downsides or the risks of them, they can result in higher delays overall compared to other types of control. Rear end crashes typically go up with traffic signals as people are stopping for the red light. And then red light running is obviously a concern for that. And there's a potential for higher injury or fatal crashes with the signal simply because of red light running or trying to get through the yellow. That's always a concern there. But this is an option for all three, could stay the way they are today. As we are looking at it, we are also considering, in terms of the signal itself, the phasing. Should the left turn, should it be a flashing yellow arrow? Should it be protected only, that type of thing, but also the geometry. So does the geometry fit the needs out there? So again, that's an alternative for all three intersections. Turning to the next alternative, roundabouts. Again, this is an option for all three of them. For roundabouts, when we use them, it's typically at intersections where you get more balanced traffic, where you have all four legs approaching it. They work better when it's balanced. That's not to say they can't work in other situations, but that's one of the things we look at. They do provide greater mobility in terms of keeping traffic moving compared to always stop or traffic signal, and that's particularly in off-peak times. You don't have to sit at a red light. You can just move right through. And your risk of serious or fatal crashes go down. And that's due to the design. Those head-on or those right-angle crashes are eliminated, basically. They can't happen with a good roundabout design. The risk or the downside that we get from roundabouts is that they often have more right-of-way needs. They're bigger intersections, or they can be, so that's a key issue that we'll be looking at. Obviously, if we have to take right-of-way, that's an expensive thing. So it goes right along with our next downside, that roundabouts can be more expensive. It's one of the things we're looking at to see whether that's true in this case, but it is a risk. And there is a greater potential for property damage. So the serious, the fatal crashes will go down, but you may have more fender benders, as particularly for people who are new to them or when they first open, there's an adjustment period, and that's when you can see those property crashes go up. Again, this is an option for all three intersections, and just like the signal, we're going to be looking at the geometry of the roundabout to make sure it would fit the volumes that are out there, which may mean 2 approach lanes, 1 or 2, again, stuff we look at as we analyze it.
Yes, Ryan?
My understanding is roundabouts also are safer for pedestrians in general. Would you concur with that?
That one's a interesting question because it gets back to active versus passive control if you're comparing it against a traffic signal.
Yeah, compared to a traffic
So
signal.
with a traffic signal, you have that indication basically that says cross now, but then you are looking for more directions of traffic. So the right turns, the left turns, as a pedestrian, you have to watch out for more. When you look at a roundabout, it's what I would call passive control. You have to look for gaps, or you have to make that eye contact with the driver to make sure that they stop. But the way they are set up, you are looking in one direction only.
That's right.
So they can be safer, but it is a different type of crossing,
Okay.
which at least makes the perception a little different.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right, the last alternative we're considering is limited access, and this one is for 5 and 136th only. And the reason we're looking at it is because of those lower volumes on this side street. And what limited access in this case means is from the side street, you would not be able to make a crossing move or a left turn. So it limits the access. From 5, you would still be able to make your rights, make your lefts, but from that side street, you would be limited to a right turn only. So when we generally look at this is high volumes on the main line, low volumes on the side street. Again, that's kind of how 5 and 36 is today. It does improve the main line mobility. Obviously, without a light, without a traffic signal, they wouldn't stop at a red light. They just continue through without stopping. We look for other routes. If we obviously shut off those movements, they have to go somewhere. So are there other routes available for them? And when we eliminate those moves, it reduces the risk of serious or fatal crashes. If you think of that left turn, that through movement, that can be some of the most dangerous movements. You get rid of it, you eliminate that risk. On the flip side, the downside or the risk is that the motorists have to find an alternative route, which can push traffic to other places, potentially where you don't want it to be. So that's something we definitely have to consider. And then also, it is a change for pedestrians. Like I mentioned, that passive crossing, and in this case, that two-stage where you're looking for gaps in one direction of traffic, getting to the middle, and then looking for the gap in the other way. So it's a consideration for 5 and 36th only, which puts 3 options on the table for that one.
Okay, but so you say 3 options on the table for this, so that means a roundabout is an alternative
Yes.
for 136?
Yes, for 5 and 36, it could be a signal, could be a roundabout, could be limited access. Those are the 3 options we're considering.
All right. Any thoughts, comments?
I got a,
Okay, because you have other things to do before you want to take
there
more
are
questions
3
and
more
discussion?
pages, but we can stop now if you'd like.
Yeah, and then you can give the open house schedule. Ryan?
I think we should go over what we heard in the first open house.
Oh, that's a good thing to
Okay.
do, because I think that was in a paper, and I got some inquiries over fire muster.
Okay.
That was in the paper.
I think we should
And
go over,
becau-
tell you folks.
Well, that'll
what-
be a
I think-
good one
and
to hit
Yes,
then.
because there are folks who are listening too, and I told them to watch tonight.
Well, excellent. So we did hold the open house last week, September 7th. We had over 50 in attendance, 49 people officially signed in. And from that, we received 57 comments. 37 were written at the meeting. We did have emails that came before and after the meeting, and we had 3 phone calls that came in with comments as well. Now, are we still accepting comments, or has that period passed?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so they have at least a couple more days where they could still look at the information and provide us comments. Some of the common themes from the meeting that we heard, or the other comments we received, there were a lot of concerns about roundabouts.
Say more about that.
There were people who thought that the volumes were too high for the roundabouts. There were people who did not like the operations of them, didn't think they fit in this area, were concerned about some of the new drivers, younger drivers coming through them.
Driver education, just
Driver
understanding
education was a
in
good one,
general of
yes.
driving a roundabout.
Have
That's not
they
used to.
used any of the roundabouts in Burnsville and in Savage?
You know, the one in Savage was mentioned quite a bit, actually, during the open house. I heard it, and I think everybody else did too.
In terms of
Is that where
whether,
their concerns came from? Because that's a really easy roundabout to navigate.
No, they liked that one. That
Yeah,
was
that's
the one
very
they
different
mentioned
from
that
the
they
one in
liked.
Lakeville.
Yeah, easier than the 50 and 60 one, yes.
And then, of course, the one in Portland is a very easy roundabout because it's a single lane.
Yep.
And Byrne and Diffley is all, Diffley and,
Ron.
and Ron. That's an easy roundabout too. Ron?
Yeah, we just, we have one over by the car dealers.
Yeah.
And we've received very little complaint when that went in. And we just opened one up by the high school in the last couple of weeks.
Well,
And haven't had, I guess we haven't had any comments. That normally means we're doing things right.
And that's a little different configuration over at the high school.
Yes.
When you come in,
Yeah.
if you're going to go right, you better make that decision back here before you approach
Yes.
the roundabout.
Right.
So that's a little different configuration. But even the one up on Burnhaven and 150th, I've not had any complaints except a lot of compliments, and especially from the Gramercy folks.
Yeah. I mean, I think we heard a couple times, I just don't like roundabouts, so.
Oh.
You know what I mean? You can't, would you agree
Okay.
with that? We just heard, in general, their preconceived notion is that they're difficult or whatever.
Okay,
yeah, I would agree
Interesting.
with that.
okay.
So,
Anybody else? Because my other question is that when you're looking at long-term maintenance and operations, signal versus roundabouts. And I know when we went through the study for the 150th and Burnhaven roundabout, we concluded that it was a lot cheaper to do that and very effective and safer.
Yeah, you don't have the ongoing traffic
Yeah.
or the electricity costs.
That's
and also-
right.
I mean, you've got light roundabouts, lighting is a key element,
Yeah.
so that's not like it goes to zero, but
Yeah.
there is definitely less.
Yeah, it's less
Yes.
on a long-term basis as well. You don't have a lot of that stuff to upkeep
Exactly.
and manage the signals.
Keep your flowers looking good in there, but but it's different. They keep then
Yeah.
changing.
I was
those
just going to
light
say Terry and his staff, but I guess it's not Terry, it's Steve and his staff can make sure that all of that gets done. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. A couple other themes we heard was need to address cut-through traffic, desire for left turn treatment, which could be the flashing yellow
Yeah, the
arrows.
People love the flashing yellow.
We heard some good comments about that, that
Yeah,
they should.
I got
be there.
some feedback also this last weekend for 11 and the Parkway, because when you're, and especially on the Parkway side, to get that left turn.
Yes.
Yeah, to
Yep.
be at flashing. And the same thing on 11 going north or going south to get that left turn.
And that is definitely something we'll be looking at as part of the review of the signals.
Yeah.
So if it goes to signals, I'm assuming that would be included as part of it.
Yeah, well, I'm interested in finding out what your study says about how much right-of-way is going to be needed on each of these intersections.
Yep, and that's part of what we'll get to with our next steps. The last couple common themes was just concerns about pedestrians and bikes moving across the intersections, and then there was a desire for right turn lanes, exclusive right turn lanes, particularly on 5 at Burnsville Parkway, which, again, it could be a right-of-way issue, depending on the needs for that or not, but something we'll look at. The second one in the handout that says open house, just specifically about each intersection. We've got some of the comments we had there. For 5 in Burnsville Parkway, the top comment was just concern about a roundabout, which encompasses a whole lot from I just don't like it to we don't think it fits the traffic, the concern about the pedestrian movements and that, kind of all those grouped together into roundabout concerns. And there was a lot more support for a traffic signal than there was for a roundabout. For 5 and 136, the top comment was concern about limited access. Where's that traffic going to go? If they have to find a different route, all those things were a concern. There was about equal support that we received for a traffic signal, a roundabout, and limited access. So once we tallied everything up, there was about equal across the board there. And the concerns about roundabout were greater than any concern comments we got about a traffic signal, which I think would be expected. The last one, 11 in Burnsville Parkway, the top comment was support for a roundabout in this location. And then there was more concern about a roundabout than there was support for a traffic signal. So although there was a lot of support for the roundabout, there were also those comments about the concern too. So as we looked over all of them, kind of a mixed bag overall, a lot of concerns, which obviously we need to address as part of this, make sure people understand why we're ultimately going to select the reason we will, which comes out of the study. And then if there's any potential education or just making people aware of what's going on and trying to address some of their concerns as well.
Ryan?
Real quick, on the 5-136, I just think we need to talk a little bit more about the cut-through traffic that will, right now, they can go, if you're coming from the east to the west on 136 towards County Road 5, we already have speed humps on one road, and we have stop signs that would not be, that's to the north on Knox Drive, and then on to the south, we have stop signs that are there for no other reason but to prevent cut-through traffic, make it less desirable. So it's, there were a lot of concerned people there about our.
Right in, right out is going to cause more traffic on Knox.
It's true, Mayor.
So,
Yeah. For people who want,
So anyway, we're just pointing that out, that was a definite concern. We heard it. I just want to point out, we heard that loud and clear from folks, maybe besides someone else at this table, but from more folks that may not
I
have.
heard that too.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that you know that we heard it, and it is a very much definitely a
But
consideration.
it wasn't anyone around this table. I heard it from other
Okay,
folks.
sounds good.
I have not talked to anybody but Sarah about my
Yes,
comments,
yes,
just
indeed.
for the record.
Just for the record.
No, but, if you live in that area, you do know there is nothing else that you can do except you have to use Knox. It's about the only street, yeah, Jenny.
And Madam Mayor, on Aldrich.
Yes.
It's right turn only on Parkway.
Yes.
So folks from that general neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
if they want to go south on 42, would be forced to cut through on Knox, and
That's
Knox
right.
to the south, not through the townhomes where the stop signs are.
Yep.
Because when you cut
Yep.
off that left turn access there, I think it has big implications, especially if it's right turn only out on Aldrich, kind of the collector street through that neighborhood.
A roundabout would be really nice there because it'll keep the traffic moving on both directions. That'll keep all the people out of Jenny's neighborhood.
All right. I just wanted to make sure that we're here, on record, we hear them loud and clear.
Yeah,
And-
good.
Yes.
Well, I'd just like to state too that the open house I thought was very successful. We had a great number of people, we had a great number of comments, and that's just going to help us be informed as we move on. So we heard about some existing concerns and then got a lot of opinions about the different options we have. So from my view, it was a great meeting, and to anyone listening, thanks for coming out.
Exactly.
And that was really good. So at the fire muster, I'm working the yellow ribbon booth, but I got traffic comments and concerns or remarks and discussion, so didn't have
I
yellow
don't doubt
ribbon.
that a bit.
So I tried to tell them what we're doing, but no, I was kidding. It was really, but yeah, it's about what we were doing on 5 and 11 and the
Okay.
Parkway and 136. Council, staff is looking for some direction.
Any sort of input, yeah.
Yeah, input on what you think as you look at these intersections. As the county and our staff continue to look at what are the best solutions. As we look to the future, 20 years out. Mary?
Well, I believe that staff and our consultants and our county representative, engineer, really are the experts in this, and I would look for their recommendations. I would support their recommendations. I think your study appears to be very thorough, and you've thought of different things, and that's your business.
Thank you.
Bill?
I don't think I could say it better, and I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Right.
Okay. Dan?
Well, I've voiced my support for roundabouts in the past. I've never heard one person say I got stuck at a roundabout trying to get somewhere. They keep traffic moving. To me, they're very commonsensical. They certainly don't apply in every intersection. But I would be in support of the direction that we're going, and I'm interested in, where you've got one that's close in support or not support. If the traffic study and the traffic flow support one, I would suggest we pursue that. I think the less lights we have, the more people keep moving and the less complaining about getting to where they want to get to. And it's safer. You see 'em, I've seen them proliferate across the country. Every time I travel, I see more new ones get put in. And so there's a reason for that. I think, we're not just doing something ourselves here. It's the entire country is putting roundabouts in to mitigate traffic issues and keep people moving. So
I agree. Roundabouts are really a great solution. Sometimes, I remember when we put in the roundabout at Portland. Well, people were just afraid of the roundabout. And, the first week, we got complaints. But boy, once they learned how to navigate, they said, that was the best idea. Why didn't you do it before? But once people get used to it, and so I agree with with Dan that when you look at roundabouts, I'd really like to understand what that cost factor would be. I know people are concerned, it's more emotional because they don't know what that would be like. But boy, once you navigate through all of them, it keeps people going. I had two ladies, though, who wanted a roundabout on the Parkway and Parkwood. Because, you know, when cars are standing there and there's all these condominiums and townhomes, well, they're listening to all of that. And it's really just a stop sign and not a stoplight.
Braking and accelerating, right?
Yeah. You know, because even if a motorcycle, they're stopping at the stop sign, so they hear the rev of the, so they were saying, why not study our area and put a roundabout? So, because this is a partnership with the county. Yeah, but I would be interested in looking at 11 in the Parkway, certainly 36, 136 and 5. But boy, Lynn Avenue and Williams Drive works very well, and that's, I think the count is probably about the same. Don't you think? If you look at Williams Drive and it's in Savage, what you have.
You'd be in the ballpark.
Yeah. Yes, please, and then give your name again. Come here, and then you have a microphone.
Oh, I was just going to speak for a second to the volume perspective. Yes, the volume at the intersection you mentioned is very compatible to the intersection of 11 and Burnsville Parkway.
Yeah.
I believe 5 in Burnsville Parkway is a bit higher.
It's a bit higher,
Yes.
okay.
And I am Christy Sebastian, the Dakota County Traffic Engineer.
Okay, thank you, Christy. Yeah. So those are just observations and comments and things that I've heard. When I talk to people, and I don't know if this is what you gathered, you know, once you keep asking questions, they say, well, I guess it's not too bad. I just don't like them. Well, they just don't like them.
Yeah.
Is that what you
It's just
experienced?
change.
Yeah,
Once they adjust, they actually find, as you pointed out, I've heard the same thing. People push back when they first installed them, and now that they drive them, they love them because they're never stuck at a light,
Yeah.
at a roundabout. And people really want to keep moving. They don't want to sit at a light, especially if there's no cross traffic, and you're sitting at a red light, and there's no cross traffic, and you're wondering, why am I sitting here?
and the other one that I heard is they put up those, they love the flashing yellow for the left turn. So if you're gonna go down that direction, that's some feedback from what I've heard.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Anything else? Because I don't know, I think you, probably when you're looking at right-of-way, and I'm looking at 11 in the
Yeah,
Parkway,
exactly what I'm looking for.
we've got our property on the,
We'll
Yeah,
put
you'll
together
look at
some
all of that.
graphics that show how
Yeah.
much we need, and if it's
Yeah.
gonna get a lot of right away,
Yep.
that's gonna be a challenge.
So that's part of our next steps. We'll be doing more forecasting, looking at more operations, the safety aspect, PEDS bikes, environmental aspects, cost right away. So all that stuff will go into our evaluation. And then mid-October, we expect to have another public meeting and start rolling out recommendations.
good, and then will you be back to give us an update?
Yes.
We'll get on schedule.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for your
Thank you
time.
for a
For
good
having us.
job.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, the next one is the Metro Transit Orange Line BRT station design. And Regina, are you going to be giving us a little bit of background before you introduce our guests?
I'll go ahead and kick it off, Madam Mayor, members of the
Yes.
council. Today, we have Christina Morrison and Jim Harwood from Metro Transit. They're here to give an update on the Orange Line that's currently planned. And so Heather handed out the presentation, and in your report, you have the background. About a year ago is the last time you formally received an update at a council work session. So we're here, there's been 2 sites that have been selected in Burnsville, Nicollet as well as Burnsville Parkway. And so station design, conceptual station design has been developed for those sites. And so Metro Transit will talk about the circulation for that. We're looking for input from council. What do you think about the architecture that's proposed? What do you think about the site design? Do you have input on wayfinding, public art opportunities, as well as public outreach opportunities? So as you're hearing the presentation, have that in mind. We're looking for direction on some of those topics. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to, I think, Christina. She's going to be going through the presentation. As you have, as you're listening, if questions come up, Steve, myself, or Jenny can certainly help answer any questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome, Christina.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Well, thanks for having us here tonight. We are going to talk a little bit about the Orange Line project overall, just kind of some of the project basics, and then Jim is our design lead. He's going to talk a little bit about the progress on the engineering and design side, and in particular the station design as it's come along over the past few months. So we'll flip to page 2. I know everyone's kind of doing their own.
Yeah, and
flipping of
again, I
paper.
apologize to our listening public that we don't have the PowerPoint available for them to be following along, so hopefully that they can follow along without having the PowerPoint be in front of them.
And
Heather.
Madam Mayor, we will put the PowerPoint online tomorrow so that
As soon as we
folks
get
can
that.
come back and look at it this week.
Okay, good. So everyone that's listening, as soon as they fix the technical issue, it'll be online so that they can follow along.
We will try to be descriptive as we go through it. We wanted to start by kind of talking about the regional significance of 35W. Many of you know this already, but we have actually over 14,000 transit riders a day on 35W using 26 routes provided by 3 different transit providers. And so we have a huge market already on 35W, people that want to ride transit, and we focus a lot of that transit service in the peak hours, primarily moving people into downtown Minneapolis in the morning and bringing them back out in the afternoon. Actually, more than half of that ridership is coming from south of the Minnesota River. So destinations originating in really Burnsville and Lakeville and beyond, people who are using those park and rides that live in other parts of Dakota County, Scott County. So we know that this is a significant corridor to improve transit service. And so people say, well, we already have this great transit service. Why build the Orange Line? The Orange Line is kind of the next step in really maturing this transit market and providing all-day, frequent, bidirectional transit. So in part, what that does is it really helps provide all-day access to suburban jobs and suburban destinations, like here in Burnsville. We also are helping to fill in some of that midday market, evenings, people who are getting off work later than the traditional kind of 9-to-5 job. And we're opening up a new market, which is the weekend. We have no weekend service on 35W, and so we will now go to a 15-minute service on both Saturday and Sunday, which I think will be a huge draw for people wanting to go to events and, sort of do more recreational things maybe on the weekends. This market we know could also be better served for non-downtown destinations. So people who are trying to get to destinations, say in the 494 corridor, which has a lot of jobs, a lot of services and shopping. Today, there isn't a great way to get there. You might ride a bus from Burnsville to 98th Street in Bloomington and then transfer to another bus. And it could end up being a fairly lengthy trip just to get to Bloomington. So we think that this could really improve that all-day access. And of course, it provides access to the whole metro system, which is sort of a network of all-day frequent service. So being able to get in the system and ride without having to think about schedules and when your next bus or train will be coming. So flipping over to page 3, just thinking about what some of the amenities are that are going to be at these Orange Line stations. If you've had a chance to ride on LRT or on the Red Line, BRT, many of these things will look familiar. So push-button heating, lighting, high-quality materials, architectural materials. We'll be having some wayfinding, some real-time signage, so it'll tell you when your next bus is coming. Bus due 2 minutes or 4 minutes or whenever it is. There will be complete off-board fare collection. So like on light rail, you buy your ticket before you get on the bus. And then we're looking at LED lighting and solar lighting or solar panels, things that can help sort of promote the sustainability aspect of powering the station itself. Moving on to slide 4, the other big component of delivering this project is really the service, just providing the new fleet, the service that will be out on the streets 10 minutes during the peak, 15 minutes off peak, 20 hours a day and 7 days a week. So this is a huge expansion on the current sort of service span that we have out there on 35W. We'll also be employing these new low-floor BRT buses that will have 3 doors. And so like on light rail, you'll have your ticket already. You'll be able to board through any door, which really helps speed up the process.
Talk more about so our residents understand when you're saying 17 miles, 12 station, but you say 10 minutes service during peak. What does that mean?
That means the bus comes every 10 minutes.
The bus comes every 10 minutes.
That's right.
Because someone might be listening and thinking, 17 miles, they saying they can get to your station in 10 minutes?
I see what you mean. So the 17 miles is the stretch between
Yeah.
Minneapolis and Burnsville.
Yeah.
And the 12 stations, we have 4 stations in downtown Minneapolis, 2 in South Minneapolis, 2 in Richfield.
But there's a bus every 10 minutes
That's
is
right.
what they need to know.
That's right.
It's a bus every 10 minutes.
That's right, Mayor.
Okay.
And then we're looking at construction starts in 2017. This is part of a larger MnDOT project that we'll talk a little bit about, looking at opening service in late 2019. This project, I'm flipping over to slide 5 here. This project also leverages a number of previous investments in this corridor. As we know, the urban partnership agreement came through several years ago and laid down the downtown bus lanes and stations that this line will use, as well as the MinPass lanes, or a good portion of those MinPass lanes. The Crosstown project was the impetus for the 46th Street station. And so there's been kind of a piecemeal implementation of transit in this corridor, transit improvements. And what we are doing with the Orange Line is really bringing together all of the remaining pieces and bundling them together as a single capital project to take forward through federal funding in order to implement.
It was kickstart with the UPA agreement.
Correct.
Correct. And that's when we got all of these lanes down in Burnsville and so forth, all the way down to 42.
Yes, and it's been a little slower on the implementation, I think, than we would have liked, but we try to be opportunistic about when we can, get another piece of bus-only shoulder or a bit of a transit advantage here and there, and so now we're looking to kind of complete that vision.
Yeah, so everyone knows and remembers to connect the dots. The orange line and the red line were all part of the UPA grant agreement. And that's where we're getting to the orange line now, because the red line was the one that was implemented first. Okay. So a lot of things are happening, and we need to make sure that we have a long-term solution as well. But go ahead.
So we are also, thinking about leveraging investments. We are also coordinating with about $360 million worth of MnDOT work that's happening in the same time period between downtown Minneapolis and roughly 42nd Street. That is mainline reconstruction, as well as a number of bridge reconstructions and the construction of the Lake Street Transit Station that would be part of the Orange Line project. So a huge effort there to coordinate the planning and design and public engagement, and then the construction of that larger MnDOT project. This is part of the kind of the critical timing of the Orange Line that we've heard so much about over the past few months. Moving to the project schedule on page 6. Right now, we're just finishing up our environmental work this fall. We also have recently completed our 30% design plans, so getting updated costs, things like that. We have been in sort of a program with the Federal Transit Administration that's referred to as the Small Starts Funding Program. We entered that program in late 2014. And so we're developing our project under their sort of guidance. We expect that the federal government would pay just under half the cost of the project, so they have a pretty heavy involvement in the development of the project throughout its lifespan. And the federal small starts program is typically projects that are under $300 million, so they consider that a small transit project. No small project for us, but as opposed to the New Starts program, which, for example, the light rail projects are in sort of a different classification that's over $300 million. So these small starts projects are typically BRT as well as streetcar and smaller light rail projects, but we're kind of, the peers that we're compared against are more our own scale. So moving to slide 7, we've had a complex summer on the funding picture. It started with last May, the legislature concluding over Memorial Day without funding the Orange Line, despite having quite a bit of bipartisan support. We were wrapped up in the bonding bill that was not enacted. And so there was a lot of discussion in June about sort of what our path would be and how we can adapt and be flexible with the cards that we were dealt on that front. On June 14th, Dakota County began discussing the withdrawal from CTIB. And so that played out on the 15th at the CTIB meeting as sort of in a related motion. The Orange Line had a small grant modification that was tabled. And then Dakota County did make their full funding commitment in July, which helps us get to that. One of our goals this summer has been to try to secure all the local funding as quickly as possible so that when we make our application to the federal government, we can show that those local funds are committed. That's really what they're looking for before they make their commitment. On July 20th, we heard at CTIB that I'm sorry, for those of you who are unfamiliar with this, CTIB is the county's transit improvement board. CTIB proposed to remove the Orange Line as well as several other projects that had a Dakota County nexus because of the withdrawal of Dakota County. But towards the end of July and in August, there was a lot of public support, both from our policymakers in all 4 cities, in both counties, in the general public, transit riders, transit advocates came out, and there were several events talking about how we needed to support and sort of rally around the Orange Line to fund it now. And under that pressure, CTIB passed both the capital grant amendment that they had tabled in June, as well as, to our surprise, a $37.5 million full funding commitment for the project. So they were not anticipating doing that. That was something that I think came up very much under this sort of discussion about public support for the project. And so that was a bit of a flurry, August 17th, as they cobbled together the amendments during the meeting itself to pass that amendment. And then September 1st, we had a couple weeks to get our federal application finalized and submit that. We submitted that last week to DC so they can evaluate our project for funding. So a very busy summer, kind of in the weeds today, but lots of really important steps, I think, over the summer that did raise the visibility of this project, in some ways more than we were anticipating, but also brought out a lot of public support for the project. So the project cost estimate, looking at page 8, our total cost is projected to be $150.7 million. And this is a pretty cost-effective project. When we look at kind of the metrics used on transit projects nationally, LRT is typically about $100 million per mile. Highway BRT is typically about $10 million per mile. So we're coming a little under that at about $8.7 million per mile. So a very cost-effective project. When the federal government looks at this, they're looking for things like that as far as cost effectiveness, how it helps relieve congestion, how it improves mobility. And one of the things I've noted here, this slide sort of details some of the different components. For example, guideway, which is what we call the roadway improvements associated with making the transit more reliable. So the transit advantages, you could say. Station work is about 16%. The other big one is site work, which includes retaining walls and demolition, utilities, things like that. But one of the things I wanted to note here that is a recent change is that under the new federal transportation bill, the FAST Act, public art is no longer an eligible use for federal transit funds. And that's something that's changed in the last year or so. So that's something that we've had to rethink a little bit how we approach public art on the Orange Line because we aren't able to use project funds. But I think that's something that we're talking very closely with the cities about how to sort of provide opportunities for public art in coordination with the project. Then on slide 9, just looking at the kind of overall funding plan, we have secured 84.2% of our non-small starts match, which is a very high percentage, and we think that will secure us a high financial rating on our financial application with the feds, so that's really good news. The Dakota County contribution as well as the CTIP contribution kind of pushed that over the top where it needed to be this summer, so that was really excellent news for our project. The remaining funds are really just those state funds that we've talked so much about this summer, the $12.1 million, as well as the requests that we've made for the federal small starts funding. And the missing state funds do increase sort of the uncertainty of the scope or in the scope of the MnDOT project. It's a little bit, right now, difficult to figure out how the cash flow will work to MnDOT because their project needs to begin. Their letting is June 2017. So we're just trying to work through some of that, figuring out how to move that money through the project. So that's a lot on funding. But if there aren't any questions, I'll turn it over to Jim, talk a little bit about design.
Nope.
So moving on.
Comments later, but that's okay.
Okay.
Let's move on.
Okay, I'll go ahead here. Moving on to slide 10. And as we start talking about station design here, really when we started working with our consultants on station design, we were kind of tasked them with working with the starting point, what's in our system, what is already part of our brand, and what functions similarly to how the Orange Line will function. We really decided to pull from both our light rail platforms and stations as well as our new arterial BRT system. Both have a lot of the same functions that we'll be looking at with Orange Line, and that's some of the images here. Again, they have a lot of the same amenities that Christina referred to earlier, be it off-board fare collection, real-time signage, and some of the length and all-door boarding, some of the things that we're looking at with Orange Line. And if we move on to slide 11, we'll get more specific to the two stations proposed in Burnsville. Slide 11 shows the routing is the Orange Line enters into Burnsville from 35W, taking the Highway 13 exit, heading on 13 North to Nicollet Avenue. It's a little difficult to see here, but there is a station, two stations located with the white circles on the plan, the first one being at Highway 13 and Nicollet. The bus would enter through the site and then continue on to down Travelers Trail all the way down to Burnsville Parkway. And at Travelers Trail and Burnsville Parkway is where the second station is there, and then back on to 35W heading on the northbound on-ramp at Burnsville Parkway.
So this road does not go on to Lakeville, is that what you're saying?
Not with
No.
Phase 1 of the Orange Line.
So it's the terminus at Phase 1,
Phase 1, correct.
even though there is a station out in Lakeville?
Yes, that's correct. The way the Phase 1 of the project is currently scoped is that it
Yeah.
ends in Burnsville.
I just want
Yep.
to make sure that's clear. Yeah, thank you very much.
So if we move on to the next slide, slide 12, which is the site plan of the Nicollet Avenue station at the corner of 13 and Nicollet Avenue there. I'll start there. One of the first things you may notice is we are proposing a cutout at Nicollet Avenue, just south of Highway 13 there, for connecting service buses. There to provide better connection to the Orange Line from other transit service, from MVTA and other buses. Then the bus would pull in off of Nicollet on the new curb cut that is proposed there onto the platform there. There's a 120-foot platform proposed. There is also space for circulation within the site for Metro Mobility, also for bus layover that will take place, as this will, in Phase 1, be the terminus. There is also off Travelers Trail a drop-off, and it's been called a kiss and ride type spot is what they refer to a lot of our park and rides, where it's the drop-off of passengers, and with the roundabout there, or cul-de-sac, I should say. I think I heard roundabout a few times earlier, sorry. To exit the site, and some ADA parking. If you'll notice, there isn't a park and ride necessarily our general customer parking at this site, but if on slide 10, we have shown, slide 11, the proximity to the existing heart of the city parking structures that are in place there. And we're
So
looking,
that's what you're going to be using for parking is the deck?
a deck. Correct.
We better look into that. What that's going to mean with regard to all of our other patrons within the heart of the city who use it for parking for our businesses.
Madam Mayor, my recollection is, I think Metro Transit is the number around 350 cars per day, you think, will be used here, which is a substantial amount of the ramp. And
That's
it will
right.
impact the businesses. I know some comments we had forwarded on to them had to do with them providing some more parking in this area specifically.
Well, my
But
concern
that is
also,
that is something we've brought up.
we have a piece of property that we're trying to sell.
Yes,
That's going to have an impact.
yes.
I am very concerned if they're going to be using up all of the parking spaces. And then also remember, during the winter months, our Ames Center has all of those competitions that starts, some go all week, or they start midweek. That takes up a lot of parking. Jenny?
Madam Mayor, when we look at Heart of the City, we looked at the parking ramp that's existing south of here, right? By the bank, Jensen's
Yep,
Cafe,
yep,
that ramp.
the heart of the city ramp.
And so
then
there's
the
some
Ames Center
capacity,
deck.
there's some capacity there because the event center is no longer in use, so that, there's some and when we look at it as in the area, as the neighborhood where folks could park and walk to within a reasonable location. We do have the HOC, or the Ames Center deck right here. And then we also have an agreement with the school district to
That's
use
right.
their parking lot kind of during off-peak time. So it will impact this lot the most directly, but we have looked at parking in a larger scale from the neighborhood sense and what that would look like. I just want you to know that hasn't gone overlooked, at least by staff
Yeah.
or Metro Transit.
No, I appreciate that. But remember, we also have an agreement with the restaurants in the area, Med Cruise, with a shared parking model. Now, when the people come in and they're going to park their cars, it's going to affect their lunchtime patrons.
Madam Mayor, I don't disagree with you. It could have some impact on them. And you're right.
How many times is it? 10 minutes it's going to be cycling through. So a lot of people are going to be parking in that area. And they're going to be parking right at the most convenient place for them to park and get to the bus. Yeah, Mary?
This is not new to me, and I believe that we talked about that one of the attractions here, because of the 10-minute frequency, is that this would bring people into those areas without their cars, and I guess I'm just surprised by the discussion, because we've talked about this.
Not that they're going to be using all of the parking that is already present. There is a lot of places that the layout now, when I look at this layout, which I've not seen before, is there's no parking. I thought there was going to be some parking on the site. Steve?
Well, I was just going to say, there's never been any discussion of parking here because there's no room for it. And I've seen a general sketch on this. I really have. I mean, I guess I'm just surprised at the direction
Steve?
this is going.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, this sketch is very similar to what we've seen for the last 2 years, but we've known from day one, one of the issues we have is we have an immense amount of parking infrastructure that sits empty a majority of the day. And so we're trying to find the sweet spot of the mix. We are going to have to, as a city, look at, part of our role in this is providing parking in our downtown environment. And so we will be looking at Travelers Trail and adding on-street parking. There's some opportunities as you head south on Travelers Trail. We have the MnDOT right-of-way and city right-of-way on a roadway, a wide roadway that's very unused. So that's kind of our next phase now that they've come up with a design. We'll be working at, can we get more on-site parking at their facility? And where can we add parking along Travelers Trail and some other areas too? So parking is going to be one of the challenges the city has to be the leader on, I think, and then wayfinding and how we make all those spots interact and utilize all of our parking in that area, so.
No, that's
You're
good
wrong.
to know. It's not that, but whether it is or not, people are also listening, and I'm looking at this and raising the issue because it is going to be an issue. And I'm not against the BRT. It's solving a problem. Yeah, Dan?
Well, it's, in our prior discussions, we still have obviously the transit station across the street for, which handles the express service.
Sure.
Demands.
Yeah.
This is a more high-frequent turnover
Yeah.
type of station-to-station type. And so I don't know that the people who are using the current transit station are going to change and park over here.
No.
This is going to bring people in, as Councilmember Sherry pointed out, come in that won't have a car into our downtown, and people will be driving here and parking here to get on to go somewhere else and then come back again. So the question I have for really the experts is, what do you really believe the parking demands are going to be by adding this station? Because that number seems sort of ambiguous at this point. Because it's not really the same as the transit station across the highway where it's
Yeah.
come in the morning, my car sits there all day until I come home from work. This is a little different type of commuter.
And the same thing with the Parkway and 35W. We knew that was supposed to be a walking because of all of the apartment buildings along the way. They would be walking rather than driving and trying to find a place to park. That was my understanding with why that 35 and the Parkway Transit was going to operate.
Sure, yeah, and I can provide a little bit of additional detail on this. Just to clarify sort of on the demand side, we haven't done any detailed modeling about how many people we expect to drive to this location. We did do as part of our ridership modeling, which was a kind of a broad effort, we looked at in an unconstrained model where there's limitless parking, which we know is not true, how many people by 2040 might choose to drive to this location. And that number was 300, and I think that's a bit high probably for what we would see here. That's sort of my experience. I think the council member is correct in that the typical rider on BRT is much more likely a walk-up rider or a transfer
Okay.
rider from
And that's what I heard
MBTA.
in the past, so. But I still want to make sure we all are understanding the same thing and that our patrons and our business owners also understand the impact. Steve?
Madam Mayor, I think the other operative thing there is that's a 2040 projection, so that's a peak in 2040.
Okay.
So I think it's incumbent on us to have a successful downtown. We have to have people there. And so
That's right.
that's going to be where the city serves, I think, as the guiding of maximizing
Yep.
some of the assets we have down there. I think we think there are options, but
Yeah.
you're not wrong. We have to be cognizant of that and work with our businesses down there, because it doesn't do anybody any good if businesses go out of business because their parking is blocking any access. So that's something that we think, if staff felt that there was no way to get around that hurdle, I don't think we'd be sitting here today. We would have stopped this conversation a while ago. So I think we think as it evolves, we know that there's some initial parking improvements that we can make. Right now, we have a surplus during many hours of the day. There are hours and events where there is not a surplus. And so how do we deal with that, and how will that mix with this? And so that'll be where the city, I think, takes the lead. And then also, how do we integrate MBTA? Because our goal is really to integrate
Yeah, that's-
MBTA
yes.
service to minimize the
That's
parking,
right.
honestly, here. And
Yeah.
the better wayfinding we do, and the better we do at getting MBTA in and out of this site, or as they've had with the pull-off, I think the more successful the site will be and the less need there'll be for people to park at that site. But you're not wrong. It's something that we're very aware of, and I know community development staff has had that conversation and talked about, okay, we're gonna have to talk that through as we work forward on this, so.
Well, because as we try to sell that site, that's going to be an issue for whoever's going to purchase that land and develop it. And that's good, but I really appreciate your comments, Steve, because I do remember the conversation about MBTA and also the drop-offs, and then where people can also utilize the BRT service to downtown. So that would be something different. Okay, Dan?
Well, from a development standpoint, I see this station as being a nice benefit to us selling that property. It's
Yeah.
going to be a big asset
Yeah.
in helping to attract a developer to put something there.
Yeah, and depending on what that product is going to be and how
Right.
many cars, whether if it's an office building, that means
Right.
they're going to have people coming in and parking during the day if it's an office building.
Right.
And so, but I think these are all good conversations for us to not just dismiss it, but to say, okay, these are concerns, let's make sure we address them. And thank you, Steve, I appreciate your comments, and Jenny, because you all have to work together to make sure that we have a good solution. Yeah, Heather?
And Mayor, Council members will remember it for the public that the council recently expanded the deck over in that area by the Ames
Yeah,
Center in order
yeah.
to help anticipate future demand
Yeah.
as well. So I think that's on everybody's minds, so.
Okay, good. All right, please. Thank you.
I'd like to move past the site plan towards the next slide, which is slide 13.
Now that we've, but it's good,
That's why we're
because that's why these things happen, is so that we can identify things and address them and find the solutions for it. And so I trust that our staff, with what Steve's comments, I trust him to, and Jenny, to work on these things for the good of this city. Thank you.
So on slide 13, what you'll see is a rendering, an elevation rendering of the proposed station at Nicollet Avenue. You'll see that, as Christina had referred to some of the amenities earlier on, one of the things we have here is a pylon. It's really the identifier of the station and the branding of the station. There is a shelter structure here that is about 60 feet in length. It is an aluminum framing system. It is with glass, basically a glass aluminum curtain wall type system. It has some translucent panels in the ceiling and some of the areas there, or in the roof, to allow some natural daylight through. What that material is we'll be determining as we move forward in the design. We are looking at introducing some, I'll call it an ornamental metal feature. That is, if you look kind of centrally located near where some of the internal seating area is, you'll see there are two sheltered areas that will be, have that push-button heat in them for kind of that additional protection. There is also some exterior seating. There's bike racks both underneath the roof structure and also further out in the platform area. This does have a raised curb for near-level boarding and a tactile warning strip on the edge, similar to how you'd see on a light rail platform from an ADA and protection standpoint. I'm trying to think if there's other things I've missed here. You'll see some of the real-time signage that's hung from the roof line itself. But we're trying to be very, very open, but also provide that protection, for those harsh winter months where our transit riders really need it, as we looked at the design here. If there's no questions specifically on this one, we'll move on to the Burnsville Parkway site plan. So again, as the Orange Line would leave Nicollet Avenue Station, it would head down Travelers Trail towards Burnville Parkway, and the stop here on the site plan on slide 14 is there on the west side of Travelers Trail. This one, mostly just due to site constraints, is a smaller, this is an 80-foot platform versus the 120-foot platform. It is, and has a smaller shelter structure of about, well, I'll get to that one, I guess, on the next slide. I guess we'll move to slide 15 if we can. It'll be a little easier to talk to. So this is, again, this is an 80-foot platform. The sheltered structure itself, in lieu of 60 feet, is actually in the ballpark of 35 feet, something along those lines. It has one sheltered waiting area with push-button heat, but all of the rest of the amenities are the same. The off-board fare collection, the real-time signage, the seating, the bike facilities, the tactile edges, all of that is, all of the amenities are same. It's just this one, and we have another one that's in Richfield, just due to site constraints, happen to just be, I'll call it our smaller of the two stations that we have there. We did include on slide 16, this is not a station in Burnsville, but it's the only render and image at night that we have, so we thought it would be good to show, just get an idea of the lighting. Lighting is obviously very important. There are many months of the year when this will be operating during very dark hours. And we're looking at adding a considerable amount of lighting, both functionally and for aesthetic purposes here. Mostly all LED lighting, looking at adding a lot of linear strips, things that really kind of flow with, I'll say, it's the kind of elongated roof line and things that we have there. Lighting, again, both potentially something that would run the length of the canopy and in the pylon as well. And then, as I said, it's not just functional, also introducing some of the aesthetic lighting and then pedestrian level lighting too, as we look at where people are coming from, where those connecting points is, and when they're heading to the shelter itself, that there aren't dark walks to get to the lit area from a safety perspective. That's all I have on station design. If there's any specific questions on that, we can talk about them now or at the end, or I can turn it back to Christina.
Okay. Anything on station design? Okay, thank you. Did you say a station design that it was functioning is in Richfield? Is it operational now or not?
Madam Mayor, no, I was saying that the Burnsville Parkway station is similar to another station which is at 66th Street and 35W, where they're both a bit smaller just due to site constraints we have there, that they aren't the full 120-foot platform. They're the smaller of the two sites that we have.
Thank you. Christina?
And then the last slide we have is just, was alluded to earlier by Councilmember Sherry, but just talking about where we go next, and primarily it's south to Lakeville. And so even though we're progressing on engineering, we're already thinking about sort of planning and preparing work for the Orange Line extension to connect from that Burnsville Parkway station south to Burnsville Center, and then down to the final terminus would be at the Lakeville Kenrick Park and Ride. So this has been something that we've been sort of working on over the last year or so. There's a lot of interest from both from policymakers in this area as well as from our riders. We have a service out of Lakeville that runs over 1,000 people a day riding that service into downtown with fairly limited midday options. So I think there's a lot of people anxious to see the Orange Line extended to give them those all-day travel options. But there's also a lot of decisions that need to be made on this Orange Line extension, discussions that we have not yet begun, but hope to this year, about how people would access a Burnsville Center station, where that would be located, sort of in that vicinity, how you get to and from 35W from that station, the running way itself. There aren't min-pass lanes in that County Road 42 area, and so thinking about, would this be a shoulder running or a center running BRT? And then parking, will there be parking dedicated at the Burnsville Center station, or would it be more of a walk-up station? And on the schedule side, we have applied for our regional solicitation application back in July. Those are evaluated by the TAB, and they would be selected in Q1 2017, so we're hopeful that would help give this extension planning a boost. Otherwise, we'd look to begin planning late this year, early next year, moving into engineering the following year, and then if we can kind of progress environmental and planning, being able to construct it as early as 2020.
How are we funding this?
The Orange Line extension, it's assumed that if we're able to get this regional solicitation funding, that other funding would be sought from Dakota County primarily. Formerly, it was part of the idea that it would come from CTIB, but I think that's fully off the plan
I think
now.
we need to have that discussion transparently and open. Simply because we can have all of this, but we need to understand how it's going to be funded. And then to Steve and Heather, as we look to the future, how do we understand, and probably Christina, I don't know if you know, how is this how the operations and maintenance going to be funded long-term. Steve, Heather?
Madam Mayor, I think we are going to continue to have conversations with Dakota County. I think that they've indicated that they're still committed to transit, but I think that's still something that we're looking for some formal recognition of. So.
Yeah. Steve?
Madam Mayor, I think with Dakota County's new role, we'll be looking as our partners to figure out what, we're already studying the 42 corridor, and we'll be looking at their new role as the transit planner and how, where the cities fit into that role and how we work together to achieve those goals long-term, so.
Yeah, members of the council, as we look at all of this, one of the things that I think might be very good is to codify all of this, and I would recommend that we ask our staff to work with our partners on both the red and orange line, because both of these corridors were all part of CTIB. So to see how are we moving forward? How is it going to be funded for operations and maintenance? I mean, we can sit here and talk about it, but unless there is a resolution, that is something. But so I would like our staff to work on this with both our other partners on the red line, to put a resolution together that we can review and you can send to them. And then we have something that we can all say it is now codified and we can move forward with. We can talk about all of this. All of this is here. But my concern is the operations and maintenance long-term for the orange line. And I'm sure if we talk to our partners on the red line, they're going to say the same thing as well. I don't know who's going to be paying for it, but we don't have any funds to start paying for transit. Bill?
Well, sounds reasonable to me.
Yeah. Dan?
Well, Dakota County is going to continue to collect that tax, and now it won't go everywhere else in the metro area. It'll be here in Dakota County, so
Well,
I
that's-
think you're
well,
right
that's-
to say that Dakota County is going to be our transit partner and lead the way, and they're going to be at the funding table in a big way.
Yeah, well, we need to have something that helps us understand that that's the direction. So if there is discussion, at least there is something formally coming from us and from our partners on these two corridors. If that's all right, I'd like to make that a direction to staff with consensus. Okay,
Yeah, and I think that's helpful for our citizens. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a reasonable request, notwithstanding that may be, what it is anyway, to inform our citizens of what that is.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, we'll work on something and bring it back to you all then.
Yeah,
I saw
please.
4 nodding heads, so.
Yeah, and then please have a conversation with our partners.
Certainly.
On these two lines, because these two lines were part of this vision, and now things have changed. So we need to have something that codifies it. Yeah, yes, Dan.
And I want to addendum to my statement. The changes, as you noted on the timeline, have been very recent. And I think Dakota County has some discussions themselves about how the things are going to play out in the future. So I don't want to put words in their mouth since they're sitting in the room with us, but there's a lot that they have to chew through to get the planning going. But I think we need, your point's very valid, we need to be there at the table.
Well, one of the things that the mayor managers, because we have asked for a meeting with the county, and then the mayor managers group and the county, we're going to have a meeting then to come together to understand that we need to be at the table on a larger vision on transportation and transit issues for our county. And as we move forward, we need to understand all of these funding mechanisms. If there's going to be a revenue stream that's coming into the county, I hope it becomes clear who's funding what. And right now, we don't fund any transit. We have a wonderful collaboration with other cities and 2 counties in an opt-out called the Minnesota Valley Transit Authority. That's been working very, very well.
Yes, it sure has.
And so we need to make sure that all of these things, because now we have a change, and we need to make sure that as we move forward, that still is a viable transit service for all of us. And then, this is another nice addition, but how is it going to move forward with operations and maintenance once it's built?
I would add,
Christine.
Mayor, that we have already begun discussing that with Dakota County after the vote to leave CTIB. One of the things that we talked about was how to sort of look at different models for the operations of the Orange Line long-term. It was actually part of their July 12th resolution when they made their full funding commitment that they also were seeking to work with the Met Council to understand the operating funds. And
This resolution was where, at CTIB or at the county?
the Dakota County Regional Rail Authority.
Okay,
On July
has a
12th.
resolution? Can you share that with us?
Yeah, we can send that to you.
Thank you.
And one of the models that we're looking at is actually, we refer to it as the North Star model because we have an operating transitway that goes into Sherburne County. Sherburne County is not a part of CTIB, and so there is a funding split where there's a CTIB contribution to the operating of North Star, and then there's also a Sherburne County contribution. And so that's something that could potentially be a model. At least it's out there. It's working today. We have sort of the bones of it. So just a place to kind of jump off the conversation and think about how to create a sustainable operating model into the future.
Okay, it'll be good to share all of that. If you can share that with our staff, that would be wonderful.
I will, yep.
Okay. Heather?
Madam Mayor, I think we've got the chair of the regional authority, if you'd like comment.
Pardon me?
We have the chair of the regional authority, if you'd like, regional rail authority. if
Oh,
you
that's
wanted to.
right. Yes. Commissioner Workman, do you have any remarks to make this evening?
No, thank you. Unless you have questions, any direct questions that I could answer for you, I'd be happy to.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for Commissioner Workman? Okay. Thank you. I think we'll look forward to the meeting that we'll have with the mayor-managers group. Okay, Christine?
And I think that's all that we have to present. I do want to mention that if people are interested, they can go to our website at metrotransit.org/orangeline. And we do have an e-newsletter that we send out every month or two. People can get updates on the project and more information about upcoming meetings, things like that. But thank you for having us.
Thank you.
One just follow.
Yeah.
So
Dan.
the slide number 19, you have
Yes.
necessarily cut, this is just all capital? Right?
This is all
not-
capital. Yep,
Not
we've-
operating expenses, is
Yeah.
to build it.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And that's, when I looked at that, there's
Right.
nothing going forward. And then we're looking at a schedule for expansion, but still, what happens
Yep.
going forward, so, which is great. Staff, as you looked at the architectural style for the project and all of that, did you all give comments to them? Regina?
You know, I think it's pretty early on.
Okay.
We don't have a lot of, I guess, firm details. This is in heart of the city. So if there's any opportunity around the station
Yeah.
platform on the site itself to incorporate some of the architectural standards that we have, that would be ideal.
Because
They're-
that's the next item, and that's the reason why. All right, Jenny?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, these items, as I understand it, the way the land use has been set up, will come before the planning commission and the city, both
Yes.
stations, correct, Regina? So
No,
they'll
but
be
they're
vetted
here
through
and
our
they're running
process.
some feedback, and so
Yes.
you do know what our design framework is. Yes?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, we do
Yes.
have the document.
So our staff has shared it with you. So the materials and so forth, because that's the next item that's on our agenda, and we do have some very good tools that you can take a look at and say, well, does it meet it or not, Steve?
Madam Mayor, we will also be focusing on how we do public outreach on this too, for public input.
That would be great.
we've done a couple of open houses and they've been at some different events. We'll work with our communications department to maybe tap into our transit riders and people in the heart of the city, and maybe some different ways than your standard open house, which don't seem to carry the weight that they used to. So we'll be working, whether it's through Facebook or some YouTube videos and different ways to get the information out. So that'll be something. And then working closely with MVTA on the wayfinding. We think that's going to be very important when we bring people both into the city, where they're going to find our different amenities, whether it's Med Cruise, the Ames Center, or what have you, and then also how do you get to MVTA and where are the stops going to be, and making that. This only succeeds if we do a good job of making it so people can get to and from the two services, and that they really don't know there's a difference between the two services. I think that's our goal too, is kind of the branding of the stations also. So.
Thank you, because I think that was some of our earlier discussions in terms of the synchronicity between the two services. And so I'm going to trust that those kind of details in terms of that wayfinding and interaction between the two services are really in sync. So thank you so much. And then it'll be great to understand how all of that works out. But any other comments? Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming in and sharing with us. Did you get what you wanted? I think I just wanted you to know, because you're asking for, seeking direction on the station design and all of that. For us, it's the materials, and Regina and Jenny and Steve will work with you, because we do have design framework and materials and so forth.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and this is Jenny, and she's our Community Development Director, and she's going to talk with us about the consistency with commercial building facades and architectural review tools. Jenny.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council, and behind me, we have our members of our esteemed Planning Commission here. We did let them know this item, and the next item we're going to be discussed, so everyone knows that they're here. This item is a follow-up from the council's all-day work session back in January, February, I think it was, where their direction was given to bring back some information to have a discussion on consistency with commercial building facades. And we also thought it would be a good opportunity to do a check-in on the one-year architectural review tool, too. So we've been using that for about a year, so we thought we would roll that into this. As you know, and this is more so for the general public, you know, the council adopts the ordinances. These are the city's ordinances, and we operate on the same team. The job of the staff is to implement and interpret those ordinances. The ordinances or interpretations may be appealed by an applicant if they feel that the interpretation is wrong. Or there's several ways in the ordinance where an applicant can apply for a PUD or conditional use permit if they disagree or want to do materials that are not otherwise allowed in the ordinance. An applicant could also apply to change the ordinance. We've had that happen a few times over the last couple of years, where an applicant has made an application to actually change the ordinance, and they've paid for those studies. So the ordinance is a kind of a living, breathing document as applications come before you. And I think the purpose of this, and I did provide the commercial standards kind of as an FYI, so you are familiar with what we're talking about here. And we have compatibility standards for multi-tenant retail buildings, because I think a couple of the projects that came before us in 2015 were multi-tenant retail buildings. And so the staff recommendation and interpretation based on the ordinance and what ended up getting approved was different than what the staff had recommended. And not that we can't have different opinions, we certainly can, but we want to, I think, take this opportunity to check in with you and make sure we are meeting your intentions, your goals of what these ordinances are intended for. And do the ordinances need to be changed? Do we need to change how we're interpreting them, et cetera? So I think I'd like this to be maybe more of a conversation, and maybe there were just one-offs, and we happen to have had 3 of them in 2015, kind of back-to-back, and some unique projects when you look at this list, and things are fine. So we're kind of looking just for direction to make sure we continue to work on the same page and the same team as far as the architectural standards go. So looking for direction on that, and any comments or questions or guidance on the architectural review tool. We've used that for a year. It becomes very helpful when we're talking to applicants about a PUD specifically. What are the benefits of the PUD? We can show them, here's what the minimum ordinance requirements is, and the tool is included in the background for anyone who has that or is looking at that online. here's what's better as a benefit to the PUD. If you want less parking or you want a taller building or less of a setback, here's what you could do. So it's been very helpful in that regard, and we also distribute that with our commercial building permit packet. So with that, I'll stand for any questions that you may have and direction that you may want to provide us.
Okay. Questions? Okay. I like our tool, and I remember we worked on it very hard.
did.
I remember sitting through pictures and pictures and pictures and making decisions on each and every one of these because we wanted to make sure that we all had the same shared meaning about what we were talking about, and a picture always could speak 1,000 words than the words that we have. So, and the nice thing is also, to your point, Jenny, is that if people wanted to deviate, there are methods and tools for them to deviate from what we have. And that's called the Plan Unit Development Amendment or a CUP, a conditional use permit. And it depends, and both of those two tools have different applications and things that they can use. So, I don't know, so you're okay, Mary?
I am, but I do have something I'd just like to add, and that is that I think when we started this, our goal was to just encourage businesses, builders that are either remodeling or building to just amp it up a little bit. And I think that we've succeeded in that goal. We're not always going to agree on what that means, whether we're planning commissioners or council members or staff. But I think that we've moved that in the right direction. But what I think might be a good idea would be to review it again in another year, because as you say, it's a living, breathing thing. And I think that we saw that architectural trends, facade trends do tend to change. They get kind of trendy. I think that we want to have the flexibility to deal with that. So I would like to see this reviewed again in another year.
Yeah, and I also want to take a look at the materials.
Sure.
Because there's new technology and new materials, and there might be some other things out there that we might take a look at that might be really applicable. But, yes, Dan?
While we're on that, can I bring up my materials?
Sure. We're talking about it,
Oh,
and so we can,
Thank you. When we talked about this at the all-day, I know that one of the goals, and some of this has been addressed, is trying to be a little more flexible and broader in what we would allow, because I don't necessarily think it's fair to a business to have to pay for a PUD or a CUP to be able to do something that is considered normal in pretty much most other cities. So, in the spirit of why we did this, we seem to react to applications that come in and the exceptions that were noted. We ended up reacting, and then we adjusted our permanent ordinance to accommodate those. So the next person that comes in that wants that, now they've got a clear path to do it without having to do a PUD or come in or pay to have the ordinance changed, et cetera. And so being open and more flexible in the materials that we allow, in the design that we allow, I think will be a very positive message to send to developers that, yes, we actually allow this now. It's not, for instance, on our restricted materials, exterior materials, we have sheet metal, corrugated metal, or unfinished metal shall not be used in exterior materials. Yet we actually allow it, but only if somebody pays for it. And I don't know that that's all that business friendly to say, well, everything's got to be brick, stucco, or wood, but if you pay for a PUD, you can come in and maybe we'll allow you to use some other materials. And that's kind of what we've done. We have corrugated sheet metal, for instance, on our heart of the city garage. And we've allowed some corrugated sheet metal on the Grand Market Square building. But how did it get there if our ordinance says it's not allowed? It's not allowed material. So what I want to pass around is photographs of, and I have one for Councilmember Sherry and Coughlin, and I gave the mayor one. And
beginning.
because Suzanne is missing tonight. I have an extra one, so I can give one to Jenny and Heather. And I kind of want to walk you through these photos
Yeah.
to give you a sense as to how, in the case of architectural design incorporating corrugated metal, how popular it is actually used in other cities.
Yeah.
Yes,
Can
ma'am.
I just go to Jenny too, because how we use it, it's accent material.
Madam Mayor?
Yeah, so that,
Here's what the ordinance says, corrugated metal is not allowed, but
Yes.
what is allowed is architectural metal panels as an accent material up to 25%. So as I look at this top picture, that may very well be what some of these are. And I know in Burnsville, we've allowed corrugated
Yeah.
metal at the Northern Tool building.
Yes.
That's one that comes to mind. The Menards was a ribbed material that's metal. So
Yeah.
not all metals are the same, and the ordinance
Yep.
makes a distinction between an architectural metal panel and a corrugated material. And some materials are used not for their intended purpose, what they're made for in construction materials and used for a wall material or a fence material, and some are, and the architectural metal clearly is.
okay.
So as you flip through these, the top one is the Super Target up in Edina, and there's a lot of this corrugated metal used in the facade of that. The next picture is the Chipotle at 66th and Richfield, and right after that is it's the Noodles and Company. So that whole development there that you've probably all driven by off of 77 is at 66 uses a significant amount of corrugated metal in its design. The Home Depot is there as well. And it's, I don't know what percentage that would be, what they've got, but the front of that Target is obviously more than 25%. Crate and Barrel in Edina, the front of that, it's hard to see in that photograph, but that is all corrugated metal on the front of that one. There's a second picture that was a little better. The side of the other side of the building has it for the Crate and Barrel. The next picture, the Galleria, actually parking area, uses some corrugated metal. Clearly, that's just a single panel surrounded by a lot of other materials, so it's more of an accent. Above the Container Store in Edina, they use a lot of corrugated metal. Bloomington, I noticed is driving around and looking at these buildings, it's used sometimes as a screening.
Accent or a-
Sometimes it's a parapet,
Yeah.
sometimes it's
Yeah.
a screening for rooftop types of things, like at the Tria, that's actually
Parapet.
used on the outside of the building, but it's up high enough, and that actually could be a wall that is screening some things. Seagate in Bloomington uses corrugated metal. The Science Museum has corrugated metal in St. Paul. Egan has it at it's used as, here in that McDonald's, it's more of a sign parapet, where the McDonald's sign is attached to it around the top, so more of a trim. Our MBTA building uses corrugated steel in Egan. Hilton uses it as an accent type of deal along with brick, and I can't tell what these were, but I don't know if they're metal panels or maybe a stucco tip-up panel on the left side of that. Hilton Hotel in Bloomington. And then another side of that, there's more used as a little roof cover, and then up around the top of the building. And there's another picture that gives you a little bit better. It's around the garage. Coon Rapids has it. It's there, they've actually used it in a darker tint, so it's not that galvanized look. It's more of a darker painted surface. We have it on the SA around their corrugated steel is wrapped around their, what do you call it, the hood, covering their gas pumps and around the top of the building. And then, of course, we have it in sort of spots. I would say it's not used in a big way, but spotted,
Accent.
like underneath as more of an accent. The Heart of the City parking garage has it. We've used it in a darker color, so it's definitely more decorative, done in something other than raw steel color. And then as you get back to the back, there's an airport area, a building there, Rent-A-Car, which is used it in a more significant way. And then the second to last picture is actually the central dental office. That's an example of an entire exterior all in corrugated sheet metal. Not necessarily what we're advocating, but just to show you what some designers and architects have done in the past to make a statement. An all corrugated sheet metal exterior. So I just think that when we talk about, and this is just an example of corrugated steel, generally speaking, what I think I would like to see us do is broaden what we're allowing for these materials, so developers can look at Burnsville and go, oh, I can come into Burnsville and I know I don't have to do a PUD to be able to design something that's going to use these materials, because they're going to want to deviate from what we currently have, which is more restrictive. And developers have come to me and said, your ordinance is extremely restrictive. You like everything only one way in Burnsville and one way only, unless we're willing to fork over and do a PUD. Why don't you work on making your materials allowed a little bit more flexible to give us, from an architectural design standpoint, a little more open door to come in and bring some designs to you? And so, much like we're sort of, and I've been on the council now 9 years, and we've done this more than once, where we have addressed this. We've looked at where the exceptions are coming in. The people are coming in and saying, we'd like to do this. And we're saying, okay, we're getting enough of those. Why don't we adjust our ordinance to just let everybody do that without having everybody to come through as a variance or an exception or a PUD to be able to get that same thing done. So that's kind of the direction that I'd like to see us go. And I certainly think corrugated steel is something that we need to be a little bit more flexible with, used in conjunction with other things, obviously, brick, stucco, wood, whatever it might be.
Do you know what Edina does? Because I'm looking at here at what was given to us. It's mostly around Edina and some Bloomington.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I don't know, I'm not familiar with their ordinances or what their process may be. These may have been approved through a PUD or CUP
Yeah, and I
process
think
through
we
the
need to take
site
a look at
review.
that, because, so that we have good information. Steve, you want to come to the table? Yeah. Yes, Jenny.
I'm sorry.
If I can, I do have a material sample for corrugated metal.
Yeah.
We have a situation before us where we have someone who's put this on a strip mall in Burnsville last
Yep.
year without a permit. And so I believe that's kind of what's driving this discussion,
This
to
is
get
like one of those
everything on the
exceptions
table.
that's caused this, right?
Doesn't look like this.
But as part of this discussion, and the property owner is here, we're also seeking direction because we've started the code enforcement process with them. We've asked them to apply for a PUD. We've told them they could appeal. And to Councilmember Keeley's point, they don't want to pay the money, is my understanding, to go through our process. And so I think that's part of what's driving this discussion. So at the end of the discussion, and I'm indifferent, of course, on what you do, but I need clear direction on how to deal with that code case.
Exactly.
Or change
But
the
let's have
ordinance
good
or-
information. I do
Yes.
understand what they need to do, and the thing is, it's too bad that they went ahead and did what they did without coming in and telling us what they were going to do and understand the process to go through it. They could have made a different decision. But but now it's up, and it's going to be more expensive for them to tear it down. They could go through the PUD process.
Yes.
And then just go on.
Correct.
But we still have to do this because it's not just for this project,
No,
but it's
this
long.
is- yeah, this is
This is broader.
And it's a broader discussion. It's
Yeah.
not just corrugated steel. This is a great example to use, and much like
Yeah.
those examples that were in our background,
Yes.
that came before us, that triggered a change in our ordinance.
Yeah.
This is another action that's triggering a
Just like
desire
we
for
did
change and
just recently
flexibility.
with the solar panels.
Yep, it's
Yeah.
exactly the same thing. It seems
So-
like we are basically always sort of reacting to, applicants coming in, and when we get enough of them, we go, well, okay, we've had enough exceptions. Maybe we ought to consider changing our ordinance to just sort of allow it,
Yeah.
rather than force it to be a variance. This is along that same line.
Yeah, and I think there's a way for us to do that. I'll go to Steve because he
I'd like to
came.
hear him first,
Yeah,
and then I
then
can
I'll go to Mary, and then, yes, Steve.
Edina actually has an architecture review board still. That
Yeah,
actually
just like
form-
we have.
We don't have.
No,
Well, we have a design-
No, this
design-
is not a design review committee. This is
Okay.
actually this is actually citizens that are on an architecture review board, separate from the design review committee. And
okay.
what they do is there are certain parameters that push projects into that path. And I only know this tangentially because when I've been up there with other things, it's been referred to during the city council meetings and the planning commission meetings. They're referring to the work of the architecture review board before it gets to them.
My guess also then, Steve, is that the Architectural Review Board already has an ordinance with materials that the council has already approved for different commercial areas. And then what they're doing is looking at that, at that project with the materials along with the architectural standards? Or are you saying they have authority to approve any design and any?
Yep.
Jenny, can
Madam
you
Mayor.
just verify that?
Yeah, right, and here's the example
Sure,
that
it's
I'll
on my
have.
list.
Here's the example that I'll have. One of the council members, it was on the committee as well, and when a bank brought their design into, through the process, and by the time it got to city council, he pretty much told them they hadn't changed it enough, given his previous commentary at the other meetings, and they sent it back. And this was talking about the shape of the building, the look of the building. This is not simply a materials thing. It was a total architectural design review.
Okay. We're looking at materials right now is what you're.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So, but I'm gonna make sure that we get those facts.
And like I
Staff
say, I
talking to
just knew
staff.
about it tangentially.
Yeah, Mary and then
I
Bill.
recall when we talked about this and we talked about having an architectural review committee in this community and decided it was not going to work. I want to make a couple of points though, and that is, first of all, I think that because of the age of this community and the condition of the buildings that we have, many of them we have, a lot of them are brick, and a lot of the newer buildings have newer materials, that this is the guidelines that we developed here tried to address that. Also, from my tenure on the planning commission and what I was seeing in council here, from time to time, staff and the planning commission have brought new materials to us and say, hey, this is something we want to include.
EFS
in
is
the
one of
list.
those.
I would not call this corrugated material in the same line as what the property that we're concerned about right now. This is an architectural, this has high-quality architectural features to it. This is not your standard corrugated building facade. And none of these are. None of them are. This is high-quality stuff. Now, maybe it is called corrugated material, but it's not the same animal. And I think this is where we really have to be careful in this aging city, that we really stick to our guns, that we are going to require, and I hear what you're saying about putting the businesses through a PUD. However, if they feel they can do business here, then they should want it to make it look good. We should want them to have it to look good. So unless there's an easier way to do it, and which I'd be open to, I don't want to just let it be open season on anybody who comes and brings in any kind of material for any reason.
Bill?
I guess what I'm bothered by, Dan, is, if there was a prospective person that wanted to come forward to change something and bring it to council and open it up for discussion again, instead of going ahead and violating the ordinance and then trying to backdoor this through this system, to look at the greater picture. That annoys me. That very much annoys me. I don't think that that's how it should have been done, and so at this juncture, unless I have all the material, and understand every city and what they did in this regard, then I'll again look at the issue, but I agree with the mayor. That's the first, as you were thumbing through these things, that's exactly what was going through my mind. What were the circumstances? How do they work, et cetera? But again, I'm really annoyed by a backdoor opportunity by somebody going forward and doing something that violated, our process, instead of coming forward and saying, hey, would you maybe take a look at this again? Maybe they would have done some of the the digging, the groundwork or something, and then, then I would have been more amenable to take a look. So that's my
Okay.
response.
No, Dan,
Well, I just want to reiterate, this is like the three examples in our background. These are the types of things that trigger us to actually take a look at our ordinance. This is not just about the Cliff Strip Center. This is about a material and about a change to our, because it go, from my perspective, from the EDA and sitting in the position of the EDA, I've spent more time with developers, made appointments and talked to developers and brokers, and I'm hearing over and over and over again, we have a problem in Burnsville. Our problem in Burnsville is we're too restrictive. We make it too costly. And so they're passing on Burnsville and they're going elsewhere. So this is just one example, but I think the broader discussion that I thought the reason that we brought this up at the all-day work session was, let's look at it, let's make it a little bit more open, make it a little bit more flexible, respond to what the developers are telling us, and make it a little easier to do business in Burnsville. Because right now, we're basically saying, we're very rigid, here it is, and if you want to deviate that, you can, write a check. And I don't know that that's necessarily the best way for us to entertain development
But that's
in
not what the
Burnsville.
mayor, Dan, that's not what the mayor said. The mayor said, let's collect the information, let's take a look at it, let's investigate.
Yeah, that's,
what the
right. So
Bottom line
I was
is, you're-
addressing or responding to your, and I get, when that applicant approached me and talked to me about it, I said, it's, you went about it the wrong way. We don't like people to just deviate from our ordinances and policies and do something without a permit. And we don't necessarily have a mechanism for that other than take it all down. But what it did bring to light was one aspect of our building materials, of our process, that is not what it should be. It needs to be more open. It needs to be more respective of design changes and materials that are used today. And so I'm glad we're going through this exercise. We're gonna move through it. I wanted to bring this particular one because I think we all probably got a bad taste in our mouth when we were told there was corrugated steel put up on a strip center. And you think of corrugated steel and you compare that to stucco brick and other things and you go, yeah, that probably didn't look that good. And then you drive around the Twin Cities and you find corrugated steel everywhere, even though, Madam Chair, yeah, it's a little bit different.
I'm sorry, but that's not the same product on that building that you showed us here.
There are some that are, no question, there's different types of corrugated steel.
So how
Agreed.
can you say that? And the other thing, Dan, is that, as I just said earlier, staff regularly brings materials to the planning commission, to us, and says, hey, this is a new product that's being used. I could go through this list and name a few that were added while I was on the planning commission. We didn't have any buildings.
let me
So
just,
my
They
bottom line
they're
message
doing
is,
that.
we need to get more open and flexible, or we're going to
Sure.
continue to be passed. Because I don't know that you've had the same conversations I have. I've had a lot of conversations in the last 6 to 9 months with developers, and I'm hearing the same thing from every single one of them. We have a problem.
okay.
And I want to make it more open and flexible and get some development going in Burnsville, because right now, we're not getting development that we should be getting. And there's a reason why, and I'm finding out what that reason is.
I'm going to bring our conversation and begin focusing it to a direction to staff.
But I
Bill.
want to ask this. Why didn't you bring this to our attention earlier then? If you've had all these conversations, it's because it's actually the first time I've heard that at a meeting or
I
gathering
will tell you,
like
in the
this.
last 60 days, I've had more meetings than I had in the last 6 months.
But again,
So, and work sessions are the opportunity to bring them up, and because this was on our agenda, and this is a building materials, and this is quite frankly, this is the appropriate time for me to bring it up. Until this issue came up since our all-day work session, which is when I started on this process, until it came back to us, what did you want me to do? Just bring it up at another work session when it wasn't on the agenda? I mean, this is
if
the
it's that
opportune time
important
for
and
me to
you've
talk
had all
about it.
those conversations, yes.
Well,
Right, let me focus it this way.
everything has its time, right? And this is on our agenda, and this is the time to talk about it.
Okay, let me focus so what I understand from you, Dan, is that you want to look at how we can look at different materials and what is our process I'm not sure if flexibility is the word, but you're looking and saying, what is our process? We still have to have that PUD. If the strip center owner had gone through the right process, we wouldn't be talking about this. We would have had it sent directly to staff and to the planning commission and asked them to do a study and to have the conversations with different developers, because we have that relationship with Jeff Lefevre, with Steve, Wellington, Maggie Linville, and all of them, because we don't have very many open lots for commercial building, but we do have the opportunity for a lot of redevelopment. And so how do we want that product to look like moving forward? And what can they do? When we're looking at industrial and commercial, I think there are some models that we can look at. And perhaps what the direction staff is asking us is, let's give good, clear direction. What are other cities doing that are built out? What are they doing when they're reviewing new technology and materials? And how is that being used in terms of their ordinance? And we should direct staff and our planning commission to begin that kind of work, so that we have a good process in how we review this, and everybody's on the same page, our staff, any applicant, and us. And then our staff when they're out and people are doing things that they're not supposed to be doing. Does that help you in terms of
Well, I think
moving
we're heading
forward?
in the right
Because
direction,
now
right. I think there's a story told here
review the
with a given
materials.
material that I don't know that would have come up or would have changed from our current policy, but not for these examples.
So review the material, and what other cities are doing, and does corrugated, how do they handle this? So Jenny, I see that you brought in a sample.
Sure.
Is that what used over at the Cliff?
Yeah, this is what the property owner supplied to us after the fact for us to take a look at to see if it meets the ordinance. This is corrugated roof decking. It is built and made after we had our building official and code folks look at this. It's intended for flooring, concrete flooring, and concrete is put over this so the concrete doesn't crack. This specific material that they gave us the specs for is not intended to be siding or exterior vertical application. So when we talk about the intended purpose, there's a lot of different types of metal materials and what their purpose is, but this is the material that's on the building right now in question.
And I think we all agree, and I would say that, Dan, you would agree, that we want our city to look nice.
Absolutely.
And we want the buildings in our city to look nice.
No question.
To your point. And that's what we want. So when we look at it, it's the architectural styles and also the materials. That's why we went through this very protracted and arduous process in picking out what looks good and what doesn't look good in terms of materials, what looks good and doesn't look good with regard to accent and so forth. So if you all agree, then we can direct staff to begin the process of looking at all of this and working with the planning commission. Is that a good
Agree, absolutely.
Agree? And just to our listening public, Councilmember Nguyen got sick, and so she's texting me and what her thoughts are. So, and I think she's okay with this, with the direction of where our discussion is going. Jenny?
Madam Mayor, I just want to summarize the direction to
Yes.
make sure I am clear, because I have been wrong before. So, we are to work with the planning commission, and what that means, we don't have funds budgeted for a consultant. We have other items on their work plan, so
Yeah.
we will look at adding this to the 2017 work plan, is my guess. We've got stuff going on with the comp plan that we're getting heavy into. But we'll plan for a study that would include what other cities are doing that address the process. That was one thing that I heard. We have a PUD, CUP process or appeals. That also, how do other cities address new technology in materials and maybe what that process is? But I believe I'm also hearing you say we want to study to allow more metal or no metal, to Councilmember Keely's question.
Well, how are they using it? I want to understand how Bloomington and Edina are using it.
How are they using metal? So
Yeah,
study the metal.
yeah.
Maybe look at their ordinance
Okay.
and see. what
Yeah,
they-
and, yeah, Mary?
What the metal products are, because this is not the same product as what you just
That's right.
held up. And there's always new, and when I said it, talked earlier, there's always evolution and new
Yeah.
stuff. And I do think staff does a really wonderful
Mm-hmm.
job in planning, with the support of the planning commission, to really look at this stuff. And, and I like that. I want to continue that. So, and if metal is the new stucco, great.
Well, let's make sure and how it also holds up. Remember when we had the discussion on the raked panels?
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. And remember how it started to look after five and the new products that came out and what they started to look like after 5 and 10 years? It was awful. Jenny?
So a couple other things. The heart of this item had to do with compatibility of
Yes.
buildings. So am I hearing you say you're okay with how compatibility has been interpreted, and this is a
It's been fine with me, but
Okay.
let me go around and say, Mary, Bill, when you look at compatibility in terms of materials?
As far as I know, because till this moment, or it hadn't been a problem.
Okay. When you've looked at, when we had discussions on and mostly redevelopment, compatibility, let me give you an example. The Aldi store and the Chick-fil-A and the Starbucks, all of that was, they're not all the same, but they're very compatible.
Yeah.
If you look at what we saw,
Yeah, the Aldi was, Aldi's actually going to dramatically change the
The-
look of
yeah,
that center and
of that
actually
whole
split it
center.
into two halves.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that, based on what we did
Yeah.
with Burnsville Marketplace, with Haskell's, which was in
Yeah,
here,
yeah.
and some of the other,
Yeah.
those are, diversity and variety
gives character.
gives a lot more character
Yeah.
than just a vanilla type
And
of
we did the
strip
same
center.
thing with Total Wine.
Yep.
Yeah, so the thing is, we haven't said, no, we haven't been that rigid.
Right.
And we've looked at compatibility, and Mary?
Well, I'd just like to point out, particularly in the Aldi store, the work of the planning commission, they did a wonderful job on that, because there were some tweaks to make it look compatible with the existing part of the center that was not being renovated, and yet having that new look. So, yes, I mean, we don't want to keep things the same, and I think that we've shown that over and
Yeah.
over again. So I think the notes that Jenny made will help us advance in that same spirit.
And Councilmember Nguyen is saying that she agrees with the discussion and compatibility is important. One of the things that I do want to speak to is Chick-fil-A, and you went online during the meeting, and you came up with some of their design and materials used in other states and other locales.
Yeah.
And they upped it.
Mhm.
It looks good, so
So we had a mini design review committee thing that night.
You did.
we did,
That's ultimately what.
and
right.
upped it, and really,
And there's a developer who wanted to be in Burnsville,
Burns.
and they did what we asked.
and I look at that whole, because it is a redevelopment of that center with Chick-fil-A, Starbucks, and now Aldi's. We looked at all of that and said, yeah, different but compatible. Yeah. Jenny?
I have a couple other things to circle back, and then Steve may have some comments or thoughts to share.
Check with her first.
To share with you. Anyways, 1-year check-in on the architectural review tool, like a consensus for that, and then I'm looking for direction on the enforcement and direction to the building
Well,
owner, which is your preference that
Okay,
you.
I'm going to go around around the room here, and I heard you say, yeah, they should have done it. Okay, Mary?
We are where we are, so what are we going to do?
I feel they just went ahead inappropriately, and I would want to enforce our rule.
Me as well. Otherwise, I believe it sets a really bad precedent, because the next person that for whatever reason, may or may not do or follows that.
Go ahead
we'll
and do it
say-
and ask
we'll
forgiveness
say
later.
that, yeah, the same thing. So that's always been my approach, and that's where I stand.
Dan?
Well, having sat here for 9 years, we've faced this situation in the past, and we've worked out a solution that was basically a win for the city and a win for the applicant without necessarily going through full enforcement, so I would not agree with doing that. I think we need to work with them to find a solution. I think they're willing to come to the table with additional design aspects to that strip center. I think they ought to have a chance to at least bring their drawings to us, and we can give it a thumbs up or down at that point.
Well, they need to go through staff. You agree with that?
Hmm?
You agree with that? Go
Absolutely.
through staff, work with staff, and find out, and then, they might have to go through a PUD amendment.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I'd
but
like to see what they're proposing
Unless
to
they go
to
through
dress it up,
staff
to make it
and
better.
do what they need to do, but that's, so, and you would agree with everybody else. I'm trying to find a middle ground for all of this, but the thing is, a precedent that's set, then someone else would say, well, they did it for that, let's just go ahead and do it, and then we'll come back. That is always out there, but it's
I know.
not
We've
necessarily.
overcome that in the past.
Yeah.
And like Councilmember
No,
Gustafson would probably remember a few of those situations that in the last 8 years that he was on council where we were facing a similar situation, and we worked with the applicant. They brought back some designs and drawings to rectify the problem, and we worked
yeah.
something out.
work with staff and see what that would be. Jenny, do you have any comments?
Well, Madam Mayor, the work with staff answer is it's not allowed in the ordinance, and they need to apply for PUD. And we asked that they do that a year ago. The deadline was July 5th of this year. We got neither an application or an appeal.
So a year ago, you did this.
Yes, so I'm happy to work with them, but I need them to get an application in so we can bring something and
Yes.
work with, something to work with them on. But to date,
they
we don't
need to
have
do
an
an
application. Our attorneys have been in
Yeah.
touch with them. I think quite frankly, they're waiting for this discussion to happen before they do anything. So they're looking for direction, I believe, and we need clear direction. So the ordinance does not allow it, but if they want to apply for PUD, we're happy to review that application, bring it before the planning commission, see what other amenities they can add to make it better or whatnot. They also, you should also know, they did apply for a permit in October of last year under our guidance that has metal that meets the ordinance. It's 25% of an architectural metal. And we gave them 6 months to put that up, and they have not put that up. So they have an open permit right now that says they'll comply, and it's just kind of what they want to do. So we have worked with them. We've tried, as you said. I don't know what else we can do, and here we are in this situation. So
Well,
we'll do whatever direction you give us here, but
the PUD, they need to come through a PUD. So, yeah, and Councilmember Wynn says she agrees that they'll have to come through our process. I mean, October, they had, it's not as if they didn't know. They came in, they showed you a product, but they put up something that was different than what the product is. And they have an open application?
It was the other way around, Madam Mayor. They put up a product that didn't meet the code, and then we were working with them on a solution, and they submitted for a building permit that met the ordinance. We issued that in October, and we
Of last
gave them
year.
6 months at least to get that up, and it hasn't been put up. We started our code enforcement process again, gave them till
Okay.
July of this year to
So-
put it up or comply.
Yeah.
So we're trying to work with them as best as we can and give them
Members of
time
the
to.
council, I would say we direct staff to work with the applicant on a PUD. Okay?
Madam Mayor,
That's the only
just to
option at this point.
clarify,
Yeah.
if the applicant decides that they want to come into compliance per the building permit, is that acceptable to the council?
Well, if they're in compliant, then,
Right. I
and
mean,
staff.
I just want to make
sta-
sure, because.
Well, when
Yeah,
staff
that's-
comes with
That
the
was my-
application before us and the planning commission, and it is in compliance with the ordinance, I mean, that's okay. But if they're not going to be in compliance, then a PUD is the tool that they use.
Perfect, thank you.
And I understand from everybody, PUD, if they're going to do something different. But if they work with staff and they're in compliant with the ordinance, then they're in
Administrative.
compliant with the ordinance. Yes.
Yeah, just with a comment, though, what I'm bothered by is, again, it might be a little bit apples and oranges again, but I don't like a situation where our staff has had to spend a lot of extra enforcement time to address this, that the other taxpayers are paying for, and that there's no penalty for what I just heard. And I'm now more annoyed by the facts that I just heard, and how, and violating the process, ignoring the rules, so, but having said that, just as a warning to
Property owners.
property
who-
owners in general, I would agree to a PUD process at this time.
Mary?
I'm getting more and more convinced that we have a code and we should enforce it.
Well, the PUD is going to be the right direction so that you can get out of the penalties. And
Madam Mayor,
I would say tomorrow, come in and work with Jenny. You have, they have an open application or an
No.
open permit?
No, we'll give them a week to come in and submit their plans for PUD and the application fee. You know, they've been in talk with our legal counsel on this for the last couple of weeks, so it's up to them. As Heather said, if
Yeah.
they proceed to build under their permit, then they're good. They don't have to go through the process. They may or may not get their PUD to the council members who are concerned. This will come before you for ultimate decision and a review by the planning commission, should they apply for a PUD amendment. So there's no, you know, as we advised them in the past, there's no guarantee that you'll get what you want just by going through this
Yeah.
process, but it is the process to follow to try to get what you want.
Okay. Are you clear with the direction?
I am very clear, and I appreciate the extra time spent giving
Well,
me and the property owner
Yeah.
clear direction,
Yeah.
so
And
that's
I-
helpful.
And I understand, and then the next part is working with our planning commission on materials, and then what is the process that other cities use when they have new technology, new materials that come before them when it's not already approved
Correct.
In the ordinance.
We'll add that to the 2017 work plan, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, yes, yeah, please come to the table.
I don't mean to move this at all, and this isn't
No,
about.
no, it's
This isn't
fine.
about corrugated steel, but if we're gonna look at that in other cities, we've got an application in front of us today for over 25% of the steel on the front of the Toyota service building.
And we've done that before, but they come in with a variance.
The PUD.
It's a PUD, yeah, it's a PUD amendment with a variance, and that's okay.
Well, I guess as we were looking, I mean, we've done that now for the Honda dealership, the
Yeah.
Nissan dealership, the Walzer dealership.
Most of our
both
dealerships.
Toyotas. And from a standpoint of, to the point about ease of applicant, I don't know what other, quite honestly, I don't know if we're competitive or not competitive if we're trying to drive business in the city and
Yeah.
we're gonna have somebody come in. What does another community do for, like, say, we could reach out to Walzer or Luther that builds dealerships everywhere, and what is the difference between how we make that work and how we?
Well, I
how
can
we
tell
do
you
it?
they like Burnsville. I can tell you that Walzer's largest portfolio is in Burnsville, because they've told me that. And you look around, all you have to do is drive around and see how many Walzer dealerships are in town with a different product. So, and you look around Burnsville, you can just drive up Buck Hill and Green Haven,
No,
and it's a dealership mall, and we've made amendments to each and every one of them for a variance on their materials. So we've done it. Yes, Mary?
Could I see that sample again? Is that what Walzer's putting up?
Oh, no,
No.
I did, that wasn't what I was saying.
That's my point.
It's
And
the-
that is,
but we-
and no, what
But
you're
Walzer
saying.
goes through the process
that-
too.
Well, in going through the process, the new material is evaluated, it is looked at and it is determined whether or not, and I think this is what you do.
That was my point. If we're
Yeah.
gonna look at new materials, there's
Right.
examples, as an example
So
of what,
just
and that's
because
not the
it's
product
metal
that-
doesn't mean that,
Yeah.
that
Oh,
we don't like
absolutely.
it. Yeah.
And if we, when we looked at, in the architectural review, where there was a variance to, I would be more interested into the sheer number of PUDs we've had to do, and if a material has come to us over and over and over and over again, and we've had to do, can we ease that if it's an appropriate material? And I'm not making a comparison.
Actually,
to
we're
this.
going to let you guys deal with that. We're not going to solve it this evening, Bill.
And again, I just want to make clear, we have a situation where the applicant proposed a product, it was approved, and then just didn't do it. So it's not a question of, that's not the question. And I think the council, Jim, would agree to the planning commission that if we find that there's a trend that's acceptable for a particular type of material and a percentage or whatever, then we may be amenable to look at that, but that is not this situation.
And I didn't mean to
It's a
tie it,
backdoor
I thought
deal.
when we were looking at other things,
Yeah,
that's what I meant.
That's
I'm
all.
sorry.
We're not solving anything tonight. You guys are going to work on it. 2017.
Thanks.
Okay, Jenny?
I'm
anything
clear.
else? You're clear. Very good. I'm just trying to make sure everybody's on the same page. Okay, very good. Thank you. And then you will have a conversation with the property owner, Jenny, and what the deadline is. Okay. The next one is also Regina's item, and this is the GIM Sports Performance Training Center follow-up. Regina.
Great, thank you. Hi,
It's
Mayor.
your show tonight. We had Ryan at the
Previous
city council meeting, but it's now it's you.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. This is basically a follow-up to previous discussion earlier this year.
Yep.
So in late 2015, we were approached by a business owner that was interested in locating in Burnsville within our Gateway Industrial Medium zoning district and within an existing plan unit development. And that sports performance training, specifically a baseball training facility. Sports performance training is not an allowed use within the Gateway Industrial Medium zoning district. That's because the intent of that zoning district is for business, office, high-tech type industrial. That's the momentum that we're going towards for that zoning district. We brought this forward to council to see if there was interest in possibly changing the code to allow sports performance training as either a conditional use, an interim use, or perhaps the applicant can come forward with a plan unit development amendment.
Where are they thinking of locating in GIM?
Yep, so the specific location, I want to say Oliver Avenue. It's where the Life Touch building is
Okay.
located. Life Touch occupies
Yeah.
Building A, and then there's a Building B, which is office, warehouse, industrial.
What will this do to parking? I know I read the background, but when we had a sports facility in the Lock industrial area, we had some complaints because the other tenants didn't have parking spaces for their customers, because when you have all of the training, the people come in for their training, took up all of the parking spaces. Now, I understand they say that this is in off-peak time?
That's correct. That's the typical sports performance training is typically off-peak. Oftentimes, this personalized training or membership-based training occurs in the PM hours or on the weekends, opposite of a traditional office type schedule. And so we've seen that in most areas, it's very compatible because of that off-peak situation, or in areas where a sports performance business can enter into a joint parking agreement with maybe a neighboring industrial building. All of our current ordinance does allow, let's see here, for sports performance training within our industrial zoning districts, I-1, I-2,
Yep.
I-3. There is a map on, let's see here, should have had these numbers. slide 1, 2, 3, 4, that indicates basically where it's permitted with a conditional use permit. And in the purple areas, sports performance training is allowed with a conditional use permit. And so when a business goes through that process, one of the things we look at is parking, and in multi-tenant situations, that's something that's evaluated and brought forward as part of the analysis through that approval process. There are times where a business goes in and maybe there are complaints, or maybe there is parking issues, but that's something that we can address and hopefully resolve if that situation occurs. We are looking for direction from council to see if we should amend the GIM zoning district to possibly allow the sports performance as an interim use or a conditional use. Part of that, the direction from the January meeting from council was to reach out to business and property owners to see if they had an issue within the zoning district. As a staff, we did send out notices or letters to approximately 50 property owners. Within that letter, we did also, we had a specified date of the meeting, and then we did also offer the opportunity to provide comment by phone, by email, one-on-one meetings, and zero response to
Yes,
date.
I saw that in the background.
So, I don't know if it's not an issue or not an issue at this point. If you do look at the map, a lot of the current parcels are vacant right now. And so if the business or property owner does not have a prospective tenant for this type of use, maybe it's not an issue. It would give a property owner ability to potentially market their property, as this is a potential use that would be allowed. That's something to think about.
And you're saying interim use, I'm going to go to Mary, but interim use, remind us again, what's the length of that?
It's really a specified time, but.
So when they come in, we can, and then they can come back, just like we've had other businesses come back when they reach the end of that,
Correct.
that cycle.
We've done some to the end of 2027, for example. It depends on the use. It can be specified within the specific agreement.
Yeah.
And once they hit, let's say that you say 5 years, at that approximate 5-year mark, an applicant can come back and request an extension.
Okay, Mary?
I'd be supportive of an interim use. I know that there are a lot of vacancies down there, and I like your background. I think that looked at all the, angles of it. And, but I would not want to just change the zoning outright. I think interim use, I think would serve, would serve our needs and certainly serve the needs of the building owner.
Yeah. Bill?
I totally agree, and I think this shows that we are a council that are business-friendly, willing to adjust and as the market changes, and this is a good example of that. So.
Dan?
Agreed.
Okay. Interim use.
Okay, so the next step would be, we would bring this in front of Planning Commission, and then, of course, the recommending body to City Council.
And we want to make sure that, the buildings down in that area are full. And if this is a use, an interim use, but our highest and best use for some of the products down there is really getting industrial but manufacturing. But interim use is good.
Okay.
Because I don't think that the number of jobs is going to be high when you talk about personal trainers. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Clear?
I am very,
Okay.
thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay. Michelle, Community Builders.
Yes, we do. Good evening, Mayor, City Council. This year, we did receive 9 nominations for Community Builder Awards, and they are Beth Tortenson, Patrick Kinney, Arbors at Ridges Campus, Barb Dory, Christian Kebler, Heart Restart Volunteers, Lori Thulian, Polly Bergerson, and Sean Leonard. Out of the nominations that we received, there was the one you may note from Mr. Kibler that was a little
Sketchy.
light and vague. So I did a little research online. I discovered that Mr. Kibler is the Burnsville Youth Collaborative Coordinator for the school district.
So he's
And
paid.
Yes, and I did check the policy, and the policy does say that it could be allowed for both volunteer and professional work done in the city that builds in the community. And so I will give that to you for your consideration.
Okay, members of the council?
They all look great.
Mhm. I agree. They look great.
Okay. They're
I don't
all
know if we've
community
ever had
builders.
a bad one.
Huh?
I don't know that we've ever had a bad one. They're all really good.
Yeah.
Every year.
I think the only thing, and I think Michelle was right to check whether, you know, the one candidate worked and is paid, rather than all the others were all volunteers. And to check and see what does our policy say, and we accept them. So, it's good. Okay. Anything else? All right. Council. Reports. Bill?
No, nothing important.
Okay. Mary?
Well, I have been, as we all have been, attending the policy meetings for LMC and Metro Cities. And as you know, with all your support, I've been bringing this issue forward of non-concentration of group homes and the like. And we've run into some real pushback from one community in particular, and it turns out that this representative from this community, who I believe is a council member, is also an employee of the Department of Health and Human Services. Yeah. So it's a very difficult thing. Jenny has been absolutely extraordinary. She knows all the statutes, the numbers, the sub-points, and, I mean, she's absolutely amazing. So she has been working with LMC in particular to educate them as to what's going on. Part of the problem that we have is that I believe other communities share our concern, but they feel a bit intimidated to stand out like this. So I keep making the point that we are not against group homes. We're not a group against these establishments, that we could even have more in this community. We just don't want to have them that close together. So I reminded the committee yesterday, that was a Metro Cities committee, that last year they had a panel, and there was a provider of these services who made it very, very clear that it was in the economic interest of those providers to have these facilities grouped close together. And he said at that time, and I quoted him and I repeated it yesterday, that he said, the day of the mom and pop group homes is over, because it's just, they just can't do it. So, as I keep pointing out in these groups, we're a city of cul-de-sacs, and conceivably, you could have several homes on a cul-de-sac and have one or two employees managing all of them, not even residents in the homes. But it's tough. I mean, I just cannot believe how little support we're getting. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
I wish I had better news, but I don't.
Yeah, okay. Dan?
Foundation got moved to next week because of lack of a quorum today.
Yeah.
Fire muster concluded with great weather. And I don't know final attendance numbers, but Saturday, I think, was pretty good. The parade route was, as we all know, was heavily attended. So weather definitely plays a role. And I believe there's a football game again on Friday night, so Friday night's numbers were, I think, a little bit softer than last year. But
Yep, there was a football game and we
Yeah.
won.
And we won. So there's victory there. while I'm on that, because the current, the Heart of the City race, enjoyed a 23% increase in participation, over 100 participants registered over last year, and it was a great day, great morning, and a great parade, and a great fire muster. MBTA, the last meeting, there wasn't anything that was too big, earth-shattering. I'm really just kind of getting back into the routine, sort of digging in deeper. It took me a while the last time I got on it to really get up to speed on everything, because the process that they follow is, you really appreciate, I think I said this to Heather, you really appreciate how well our staff provides information, background material, data, and in a way, I'd say this is a compliment, spoon feeds us the information. I feel like I'm able to make an extremely educated decision and vote when I get to that point here. And with organizations outside of us, it's sort of like, here's your stuff, and you're voting, you're jumping right to vote. There's not a lot of preparatory discussion going on. So I'm kind of getting into the groove again with transportation. Must say it's fun. I certainly enjoy the MBTA as everyone did, but happy to be back on it. And that's it. Nothing. I think this Friday, Jenny, I'll have my last opportunity to be with her at the Housing and Economic Development meeting, and she has been keeping me updated. After the first two meetings, and so staff is Burnsville is well represented there with Jenny at the table.
I'm the chair of the committee this year, if you didn't know that. So.
Oh, wow. Now I'm feeling really bad not making the last meeting.
That's okay.
Two meetings.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay, very good. Convention and Visitors Bureau, financially, we're doing well. Everybody remember, we have the event, the art event, that is focusing artists and their work on Burnsville, and that's going to be showed on September 22nd, and I think all of you received an invitation. So, and it starts at 5:30 for the VIP reception, and then there will be the art show that you'll all see. But it's really going to be very interesting and excellent, because it's highlighting all of the iconic or the interesting areas of Burnsville. City Hall is also one of the sites, Black Dog, Buck Hill, the Kramer Quarry, and others. So it just says that we have a lot of wonderful venues within our city, and that's going to happen. So, but otherwise, we're coming down to looking to the future, and next year is the 30th anniversary. Is that the 30th anniversary for the BAC, for the Burnsville Convention and Visitors Bureau? And we're going to try and highlight something every month next year. But financially, we're doing very, very well. There's an uptick with all of our hospitality product. There was, I think, 2 months where they were down, but their average daily rate was high. So we got really good revenues on that. Metro Cities, our work was done last month, and so there's no report there. And Savage and Burnsville, we met, and we meet quarterly or every other month, Heather. Quarterly, yeah. And mostly was all updates. Heather gave a report on the landfill, so that they have an understanding of that. Also Steve gave an update on water and the work that we do with them. Otherwise, it was mostly a lot of discussion around.
Talked a little bit about the comp plan.
The comp plan, and of course, everything that had to do with water. So, and International Festival, that was all good. We have a breather right now. Otherwise, that's it. Bill?
Just a quick comment. I didn't say anything about DCC. We voted to make an offer to a certain person, and I'm not going to say who that is till next month. I assume we'll negotiate, and the person will be hired, and then I'll announce it. It's not a secret, but.
Well,
till
you
the
have to make
deal's
you have
done.
to make the offer first.
Right.
And
till
you
the
have
deal's-
to have an
right.
acceptance before you can
Correct.
say you have someone.
Correct. So we're at that stage.
Okay. Michelle, you have anything else? Heather?
I'm in.
Jenny?
I've said enough.
We stand adjourned by acclamation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.